All right. Good evening, everybody out there. I'm Kevin, your host for Motley Crude, your favorite new Warhammer the Old World podcast. This evening, episode 7, we're going to be talking about a team tournament that we are going to be hosting in Ottawa in the new year. And then we're going to be having a return on the SBOT Toronto tournament, which we all attended 2 weeks ago. We're going to be discussing that. On top, we're going to be having our very first guest here at Motley Crude in the short history of this podcast. We've got the legend himself, community leader, and as per his latest podcast episode, lore master, Mr. Val Heffelfinger. How are you doing, buddy?
The tone's a little different this time around. It's interesting now that I have a live mic, I'm not just shouting at you alone in my car. So that's good. That's good. I'm great. How are you guys?
We're doing well. I'm great. Perfect. What about you, Andrew?
I am also well.
Perfect.
A little bit sick, but well.
Yeah, did you bring that back from Toronto? That dirty city, or?
No, I brought it back from my kid from daycare and
okay.
All the dirty rugrats there.
Yeah, fair enough.
That is a bit like a very large daycare, so that the tracks.
That makes sense.
It's only like 6 kids, so I can narrow it down who started this shit. I'll figure it out.
Patient 0, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you contact tracing your child's daycare?
No. That'd be crazy.
If anybody's listening, no. No is the answer.
That is all jokes. Do not call the authorities, please.
Exactly. Awesome. So let's start with let's kick this off with a bit of a hobby roundtable. So Val, this is your first time on the show, obviously. So this is your sort of soapbox moment to talk about what's new in your hobby over the last few weeks. Painting, playing games, general nerddom stuff, like whatever you want to preach about.
My hobby has mostly been stepping over the boxes I need to put away from SBOTL. And cursing the fact that I just have left everything out in my hobby space, and sort of been daydreaming. Maybe this is I put this out in the ether already, but like I have a lot of really I'm wanting to play more vampire counts, and I don't have a ton of the cavalry, so I've been fantasizing a lot about just painting the cavalry for vampire counts because each one is super cool, from the Hex Wraiths to the Blood Knights to the Black Knights. Did I miss one?
No, I think you got them all.
Got them all. So I'd love a unit of each of them, and I only have 5 Blood Knights. So that's kind of what I aspire to. Once I actually can get back to my hobby desk, that's what I'll be working on.
The old Blood Knights or the new Age of Sigmar ones?
Such a good question. I'm torn between them.
Fair.
Basically on a daily basis, I flip and flop because there's no doubt in my mind that the 30 by 60 millimeter base is designed specifically so that things like the new Blood Knights could fit.
Yeah.
In Old World, and the new and quite frankly the old Chaos Knights, because it didn't really fit together on the 50s. So yeah, the thing I think I might wind up doing is actually going with one of the many very nice 3D print options.
Fair.
Off the top of my mind, I know Highlands does the most like hilarious knockoffs of just like like they really have the GW vibe, especially the old Hammer GW vibe, I think, down pretty pat. And then I know like Last Sword Miniatures make some really nice things, and I'm sure there's countless others to choose from. Yeah, so
exactly.
I think that's probably the way I'll go, because that gives me sort of an updated, not as monoposed unit choice that will look perfect. They'll fit right in. Most people wouldn't even necessarily know. And I think I'll go that way because I don't know. I'm eager to see what an updated cavalry scale model looks like in Old World. I guess some of the Bretonnian characters are updated scale, but it's going to be a rough transition.
Yeah, sure. And I think one of the advantages of like going with the 3D print route is the painting will be less tedious than the new Blood Knights. I've painted like I think a dozen for AOS when I used to play that game, and they are like each one is like the equivalent of like 7 infantry models because of all the bits and bobs on there. They're beautiful, but yeah.
Yeah, I saw someone who had used. Oh, I can't remember what they used them for, but the peoples of Sigmar, the cities of Sigmar.
Yeah.
Their cav models, and they were like, "This thing is so beautiful, but also took 1,000 hours." So
Exactly.
I understand those feels.
All right. So let's move on. Ryan, what's new in your hobby, buddy?
Not much. Since getting back from Toronto, I have cleaned my hobby room and put everything away.
Awesome. I think that's a hobby achievement in and of itself.
That's a flex. That you're flexing on me.
Well, I share the space with my wife, so it can't be a tripping hazard for everyone at all times. But in the daydreaming space, I just keep having visions of like a desert themed wood elf cavalry army, which unfortunately
What?
no one has like. Yeah, just like Lawrence of Arabia meets wood elves. I don't know why.
Okay.
Or the Fremen
Sure.
meet wood elves. I don't know.
I like everything about wood elves except like the wood.
Except trees. Yeah, I hate nature. It's fine.
Awesome. Will you have a cactus themed treemen or?
No, there'd be no tree men.
Okay. Because they're both terrible and don't fit with the theme.
Actually, I love the idea of cactus treatment.
I don't know why I went straight to like it's a rock monster. It doesn't have motivation, but yeah,
Sure.
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, you could use like the rogue idol almost.
Yeah.
Do you like the Mario cactus man?
That's where I was like.
But anyway, that is a really long way of saying I have done nothing.
That's
How about
okay.
you, Andrew?
Thinking about the hobby is hobbying. You're good.
I have played a lot of Diablo 4 and worked a lot of 13 to 14 hour days. And right now I am painting Necromunda models that have been sitting on my desk for over a year. So
In the last episode, you shouted out almost being a Necromunda completionist.
yes,
Is that true?
I own every plastic release that GW's done for Necromunda and a lot of the Forge World like special characters as well.
Are we talking Forge World, Eastern Promises type?
Mix of both actually. I
yeah?
have
Okay.
yeah. Half and half. 75 30.
It's one of the most rockin' model ranges ever. It's like the first time I ever thought to like related to the idea of someone who just buys the models because they're cool. I think that all of the supporting stuff for Necromunda fits that category.
Yeah, I think every time there's a new Necromunda release, I'm like, okay, I'm getting these guys because they're amazing. Every time I sort of pass on it, but I'm like inches away from clicking that buy button. So yeah, fantastic spots.
I'm really confused on how much support this game gets from like it's got to have a huge following, I guess, cuz like they're getting almost like bi-monthly like big releases and characters and constant plastic kits. Like at first I didn't think they're like they can't be that huge of a market, like it can't be a big money maker for GW, but like it's got to be if they keep supporting it this much.
Yeah, I think because it's less of an event and organized play game, it sort of flies under the radar, but it's got a massive following. Like I think it was it Yak Tribe that sort of carried it forward for like I don't know how many years it was offline on the main GW site, but I think it has massive community support. Just you tend to see less of it.
Also, I think we're all what the kids would call boomers, non-pejoratively. But I think we were raised on this idea that like every mold and cast that GW made, like put the company on the line. Like they used to always say about just how expensive like every single kit was. And I assume in real dollar terms that's probably still not a lie, but they're just so vertically integrated that they can tool up kits like this and have a pretty low volume run, and I don't think they would give a shit. So I think that's probably part of it too. Like their scale is so crazy now that they can just have a game with all these fancy little pieces and plastic kits, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. And there's probably like I mean, it's tough to comment from the outside, but there's probably a significant amount of lag between, the specialist design studio getting its marching orders to make all these fun characters, and then if one or two sculpts don't, end up making their money back, for the lag time between that being realized by the head shed and new direction coming down is probably massive. So they just keep going based on the last thing they were told type situation. Okay, all right. So moving on, my hobby. So unlike I think the three of you, I did play a game over the last week. So as part of my SBOT 2 online tournament sign up, I played my first round game. Played into Wood Elf, Sisters of the Thorn, Pillar of Fire, ballistic shooting type. I'm gonna say spam, but not in the pejorative sense. Type list.
Mhm.
Unfortunately for my opponent, it's a bit of a hard matchup into Chaos Dwarfs. So I've spoken about this in like the Tactica episode that we did. Like low strength, low toughness elite armies are kind of like the natural prey of Chaos Dwarfs. So the result was a little bit what I expected it would be, and it was a pretty solid victory for the Chaos Dwarfs. So
And a lot of resistance to fire, right?
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
half the army, basically, because I have some greenskins, but half the army shows up with that black shard armor, and then has 5 up wards against it. And then most of his like ballistic shooting is strength 3, and the army is toughness 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's a bit of a rough go, definitely for him. So that leaves me in a good position to start the tournament. I'm also in the Pot of Death North America 1 with all the keeners. So. So
Yep.
we'll see how that goes. Aside from that, I've been painting my Mordheim Warband for the campaign that Danny, friend of the podcast, Danny McDonald, is organizing. I'm halfway through ish on the Warband. I built all my cool runed cityscape themed bases last night, so I'm pretty pumped about those. And then today I received a ton of stuff from Tooth and Coats, the paint range that's out of the UK. I backed their wave 3 of their Kickstarter, so I'm excited to see sort of what's in that box and pick through it and try some of those colors.
With Mordheim, are you guys experienced Mordheim players? Like, have you guys even going back? I never played it. I was just...
it's a mixed bag. It'll be my first kick at the can. I've wanted to play Mordheim for a long time, but never sort of found a group to play it. Danny's run a Mordheim campaign once, I think, or he's participated in one at least. And then we've got I think like a dozen players that are lined up for this, and it's a mixed bag of I've played tons of Mordheim to like some newbies, so it should be pretty cool.
What do you guys think about the fact that the old world timeline does not have the comet hitting Mordheim in it?
I think we are suspending our disbelief on this one, and we are going to just forge on and play.
I just like Mordheim getting the. Can you like? I just can't imagine how fucking cool a modern Mordheim would be. Like
it would be amazing
if it got the Necromunda treatment, like as evocative as their sculpts are for Necromunda. Like, man, they could go to town.
Yeah. So I am 100% with you on this one. I'd love to see them fucking revisit that setting. The problem is, I think like you, Val, I've never played it, but I think it's cool, and I'd love for GW to like sort of get another crack at it. But all the veteran players are like, don't touch my Mordheim. It's perfect. I don't need GW to get their hands anywhere near it at this point. So I think your opinion and my opinion is kind of the minority opinion on this one.
I think like there was that opinion existed for old world too, and I would say that the grumpy ones, like even like there's the grumpy ones who are just like, no, don't touch it, and then there's also the ones that are like, why would I be upset? Like I can go buy the kits I wasn't able to buy, or there might be some cool models and shit. So like, I mean, the people who don't want to use the new rules, again, if this is a lot of garage gamers, if this is a lot of people playing with their own little groups, they're doing what they want anyway, right? So like,
sure,
new shit is just cool. I would think that even that community wouldn't be unless they got C&D'd, which because there are a lot of online resources for the old stuff. So
yeah, a lot of really exactly some really solid online resources with all like with all the material you could ever want, basically.
Yeah. When that vanishes, everybody, that means that Mordheim's coming. That's literally what we called out the demise of another thing. I think Danny plays. Maybe Danny does or doesn't play. Epic Warhammer Fantasy. That got taken down, as did Warhammer Armies Project got taken down. So that's the canary we're looking to die.
Yeah, or close to my heart, the people who got C&D'd for making 3D sculpts of Chaos Dwarfs recently, or over the last 6 months, maybe.
Yeah. That was Kingdom of Heaven. No, Lost Kingdom.
Lost Kingdom, exactly.
Yeah.
I think they call them their Mag Horum line or something like this.
Yeah.
Don't quote my pronunciation, but yeah.
Yeah, Chaos Dwarves are back.
Chaos
For sure.
Dwarves are back. Yeah.
Confirmed. By the legal department.
Exactly. Awesome.
There was a rumor, like, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, that they were working on a Mordheim revival.
Okay.
But that it was going to be set in the AOS like timeline or whatever.
Isn't that what they tried to do with Cities of Darkness or
Warcry?
Damned? No, Warcry, but there's that board. There's like the
Curse City.
Oh, Curse City.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That was like a Warhammer Quest spin-off,
exactly.
wasn't it? Like this is supposed to be like the spiritual successor to Mordheim. Again, it's all rumor and nothing's been said, so it's probably just conjecture. But that was a rumor floating around like a while ago. It was
the
like,
thing is like that kind of a game is just such an SDS project, and SDS doesn't touch the main studio games. They only handle like all the peripheral shit. So like Horus Heresy and now Old World and Lord of the Rings and stuff. So I don't know. I'm holding out hope.
Yeah, you're right. That one, and then if we're wish listing Mordheim and then Battlefleet Gothic for me, I'd be down for that.
But it'll be Horus Heresy. That's the heartbreak.
Well, one can wish, one can hope. Okay, all right. So moving away from hobby talk, Ryan, you wanna walk us through some of the news? I know there's not much rumors or anything, and we've talked about some of the events last episode. But anything you want to shout out, event related, or Val, anything in your neck of the woods?
So just to run through kind of the next 2 months here in Eastern Ontario. We've got an event November 3rd in Kingston at Nexus downtown. It's a 2,000 point tournament. We have...
What's the date on that one again?
3rd of November.
Oh, man.
That's this coming Sunday.
Oh, yeah, I guess that one's not happening for me. That's too bad. I hope they get some people out to that. I would love at least a second one of those. Anyway, I love Nexus.
Yeah, no, this is their second event they've had in Kingston so far, and then I'm hoping to team up with the guy that runs their events because I'm going to be in Kingston for work from January to May, and try and do something in that time frame.
Nice,
sweet.
Yeah, and this is like a easy driving distance for us, and it's not too bad from Toronto either. So it's a cool other place to go for events for sure.
So then following that, we have Ludo on November 19th in Gatineau. That's 2,000 points, but with like intense early 2000s style comp.
Yeah, I think we can almost say a narrative event at this point.
If you want to play 5th edition with old world rules, this is where you want to be. December 8th, we have Danny McDonald's 1,500 point Highlander tournament at the Red Dragon here in Ottawa. And then December 14th, we have a 2,000 point tournament at FDB in Gatineau. That kind of rounds out the year here in Ottawa, which I didn't do the math on it, but I realized I think we've averaged, because of the clusters of events, I think we've actually averaged more than one event a month since the game came out in the greater Ottawa area.
Yeah, I think we're like easy at 2 a month. Easy.
Which
it's just they come in like 4s for some reason.
What's the turnout been like?
Good. So the RTTs I've attended have been around like day one RTTs have been 12 to 14 people generally.
Oh yeah.
So that's perfect. I mean, you're in a good space there. We've had 2 GTs. So the CTC and CCBB.
Mhm.
which of both you were at CCBB. That was a great turnout. So yeah, I think in general it's pretty good showing.
Any other ones?
That's it for at least things I've listed for the rest of the
Locally,
year. But yeah, locally.
Val, anything around Toronto?
Around Toronto, yeah. I mean, there's actually a number of stores. Obviously the X Planet, which they host. I would say this would be their third or fourth. They've got one in November. You can check that out on their website or on Facebook. Black Knight Games in Hamilton's got one coming up. There's one called, I want to say, Tabletop Forge, and they're in Barrie, and that either has just passed or is just upcoming. So
Okay.
there's definitely people around getting events off the ground. There's also one from an attendee at CCBB who's running a GT in Trois-Rivières.
Trois-Rivières.
Le Grand Clash.
Yep.
And that one, he said his tickets are going on sale this weekend. He was hoping I'd plug that on Squarebase, so hopefully I will remember to do that. But I remember to do that here. So yeah, then
Awesome.
that's a 40-person event. I don't know if they're friends of the show or not, but seemed like a good guy.
They are.
Yeah.
Seemed like a good guy. And
I think Alex is the organizer, Alex Thibodeau.
Yes,
So
yes.
working my French connection with him, and he's a great guy.
Yeah, it's a pretty far way up a frozen highway for February, but certainly would be cool to be able to get up there. So that's what, February 7 through 9th. So it's a 3-dayer, and they're doing doubles on the Friday for Old World. So I don't know. Seems like a fun thing.
Awesome. And I know he's got, I've seen it on BCP, a qualifier event for that where you get like free tickets if you win type situation, an RTT. And I think they're up to like 14 tickets sold, and it's in the coming 2 or 3 weeks there.
And that's up in Trois-Rivières?
Yeah, in Trois-Rivières, exactly. Yeah.
I did forget about one more event.
Oh.
Du Bois GT in Rochester is having an Old World GT. I unfortunately can't make it this year, but I'm going to put it on my calendar for next year if they keep doing it.
They're also sold out right now.
Oh no, I mean I knew about it 3 months ago when I could have signed up. I was just busy.
Old World singles. Look at that.
Yeah, 32 players I think at the event.
Way to go, guys.
Yeah.
I went to that for 40K like over a decade ago.
Yeah.
So it's cool to go back.
Nice.
It's funny. There was a time where you had to travel for GTs, and now we just have them where we live. Makes crossing the border a little more tricky, but I will get back to the Du Bois someday. And Joe Sabota, who's one of the TOs, was at my the only one of the only 8th GTs I got to play in when I went to Du Bois, and that's 8th edition fantasy.
Nice.
So some good folks down there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're, like you mentioned, a little bit spoiled now with like GTs springing up all around us, but I'd love to go too in the near future, hopefully.
Yeah, Rochester's about as far as I'll go these days, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a 4-hour drive, I think, for us, Ryan. Is that accurate?
It's basically directly across from Toronto in upstate New York. So it's functionally the same distance.
Okay, so more like 5. Okay, 5, 6. Cool.
It might be faster on the toll road, but
sure. Okay, we are getting extremely local discussion right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Giving the people what they want.
Exactly.
To all the Europeans that don't care about the geography of upstate New York and southern Ontario, I apologize.
But it is a hotbed of Old World, I'll tell you. Actually, I think that is true. I feel like we have per capita more events going on right now than maybe
just about anywhere else.
Maybe anywhere other than the UK.
Yeah,
I mean, we have more podcasts, so.
Well, yes, we are a podcasting powerhouse. Well, Australia probably still has the edge on us. There's more of them sprouting up all the time.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So let's shift to our the first main segment of our 2-parter tonight. Let's do a bit of an event recap for SBOT Toronto, or SBOT TO, I think is how we're officially calling it. Val, I'm sure you heard our last episode where we went through all the nitty gritty of our games. So for the listeners out there, this is a little bit more of an overall, like, high level thoughts. Like, how do we feel about the organization? How did the tournament pack shake out? Like these kinds of big ticket items. So let's start with just our overall 1,000-foot, thoughts on the event. What were some of the, like, did you enjoy I'm sure everybody enjoyed their time there, but like, did you enjoy it? Some of the highlights from your perspective, etc. And Val, over to you first.
Oh, no, by all means. I'd love to hear from the attendees first.
Okay, awesome. Andrew, over to you then.
Yeah, overall, I had a really good time. The tables look great. um, 5 good games. All my opponents were really good. And I was happy that I got to face like different armies every time. Like, I know in our Ottawa scene, there's like a lot of Tomb Kings and Bretonians. So like, usually those events, though, at least the ones I've participated in, it was like a lot of like, oh, I played the same army twice, or so it was nice to see that variance. And these kind of large events always have like their own energy to them, with like all these people in the same place who are just really enthusiastic about the game. So even like being able to talk to people between games that maybe I didn't play with, but they'd, come by and see me and be like, oh, you're playing Dark Elves. And it's like, how are they doing? Like, you get into these conversations with people that you might not normally, speak to outside of like the gaming scene. So I always like that vibe about these sort of GTs. And overall, like, Val and Shane just crush it on the running. I know you're here, so like I can't talk too much shit, but like, there was no, other than like day 2, which was out of your control, there was no real hiccups. That being the marathon right in the middle of Toronto, so it kind of like stopped a lot of people who were maybe in the peripheries of the city, like getting to the hall on time. But again, like, that's not, you couldn't control that.
Not to throw anyone specifically under the bus, but the people who were late completely ignored the specific instructions I gave them. So,
I mean, I'm just trying to give them benefit of the doubt here.
I mean,
but
we
like,
made it on time for Mississauga, so
yeah, like,
actually,
I was
Mississauga
there,
is
like,
that
45 minutes
it's
early.
yeah. So again, getting into the weeds of Southern Ontario geography. That meant as long as you didn't get off the highway too early, you were fine. And that was actually what a lot of people wound up having to do, is they actually had to drive almost out to where you were staying and then turn around and so that they can get going eastbound on the Gardner. But they had to like essentially drive all the way out of the core of downtown Toronto to the west, so they could come all the way to get to the east of downtown Toronto. And that's why things took a very long time. But yeah, and I was impressed that, as flustered as people were dealing with that, both the opponents who were sort of stuck waiting, because also like 2 out of the 3 people who were really screwed by the traffic were also on our top tables, like tables 1 and 2, which was really funny. So they managed to settle down and play their games, which was great.
Yeah, and I think that explains a bit of the fact that you were willing to be lenient on the time, because if those people didn't show up, it would have messed up the event big time.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I'm glad. I'm like, if the question I asked is like, did anyone have to catch a plane? Luckily, there were some out of towners, but they weren't too impacted. There's some folks who were actually staying for a few days afterwards, so we were able to, let 30 minutes slide pretty easy, and then even then, use chess clocks for the people who were even later than that. And I don't know, it did wind up working out.
Yeah, I think it worked out. It worked out great. And shifting to sort of my impressions, I really like 1,000-foot view perspective here. Overall, I think the event was a success. I really enjoyed my time there. I'll be looking to go again next year. I had 5 great opponents, so this is hazardous after 2 weeks. But Christian, Dan, Keith, Timmer, and friend of the podcast, also Cleary. So 5 guys I really enjoyed playing against. One thing I forgot to shout out last episode, but I do want to shout out now, is that Timmer brought to a tournament nothing but whippy sticks. So no measuring tape, only whippy sticks. And I give him mad props for that. Sorry?
He's a good friend of mine, and I also, what's funny is that I had noticed him measuring things with his whippy stick, and I didn't even say a thing. I was just like, "Yes, okay, accept this. I'm just gonna roll with it."
Yeah, there was one moment in the game when I think he was like he wanted to fire his Screaming Skull catapult, which is like a 30 to 40-inch range type thing, and he sort of just looked at me holding his whippy stick, and then I just gave him my tape measure, and I was like, "Here you go, man." It was great.
The question is, did he give you a car pop?
He did not. He did not. No, I haven't reached that level of.
Yeah, he doesn't.
friendship.
He didn't love you that much then.
No, exactly. He heard our previous episode about the tournament, and I think we were on his shit list, frankly. So, okay, yeah, no, those are my takes. Ryan, what about you?
You guys have hit everything. Like, it was great. Like, venue, great. Lots of food within walking distance once we figured out where it was. The atmosphere was great fun. Like, people just coming around, chatting between their games, asking you questions about their army, all kinds of things, meeting people from all over the place. Got asked one of the most comical Canadian American doesn't understand how things work on the other side of the border questions by my opponent from Pittsburgh.
He didn't know how to
who
use
wanted
the
to
three
know-
seashells.
No, he was deeply concerned that Canadians did not have ready access to tape measures in inches. And
Okay.
I'm like, all of our tape measures just have both.
Yeah.
And like, as a former licensed tradesperson, I don't think I ever measured anything professionally in metric
No.
in the plumbing space ever.
Yeah, we're becoming super local again because we will alienate all our European listeners, but I would be shocked to see a centimeter only measuring tape.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, we're weird like that. Did we also measure our weight in pounds? It's
Yeah.
odd. But
even in my previous life, like in the plumbing code, it would have the official measurement in millimeters, and then in brackets it would just say like 3/4 inch for like a pipe diameter or something. We phone it in hard. But anyway, overall, fantastic atmosphere, great time.
Awesome. So circling back to you, Val, from the sort of TO/ringers perspective, what do you think went well with the tournament? Anything you'd change going forward? What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, heavy criticism on the $18 sandwich, which I hope you guys didn't order, because I ordered it out of mostly sheer laziness and availability. I dutifully placed my order. Luckily, I only did it for one day. And also, you order an $18 sandwich and you're thinking to yourself, okay, it's $18, but I can eat it for 2 days because it's an $18 sandwich. So it's going to be a friggin' gigantic, just overflowing with meat sandwich. This was the most pedestrian sandwich I have ever seen. And it was the most bullshit sandwich of all time. So that would be my big call out. That sucked. That was actually, I passed that on. Also, shout out to Andrew, because literally the event couldn't have happened without the terrain coming up. So many thank yous for that. And then the litany of bullshit you had to go through to get home, which happened to me one year coming back from CCBB. So we now both share that disastrous flat tire on the way home from a GT experience. I think like organizing an event, there's so much of it that I think the hardest part is terrain. I think hands down, the hardest part is terrain, and that was mostly done for me. So after that, it's a question of like a lot of the tools for organizing. Like we do have great resources now in the community. Whether or not it's Best Coast pairings or next time, guys, I'm probably going to go new recruit. If only because I mean it links directly to the lists. They have some nice added features as well for scorecards and customizability. It would be a real culture shift because everyone just knows BCP, but I kind of feel like that's the platform to support, to be honest with you, at this point.
Sure.
But BCP was completely fine. Also, even though I just said I want to change from them, they updated just before the event for me. They updated the scorecard, so that point differential that we used actually is built into the app now. So that was something that they did right before. They updated all the factions for me, so they sort of cleaned up Old World just literally on the Thursday night before we got there, so that we had those features, which was really wonderful of them. So thank you, BCP.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of development in the last few weeks or months, it feels like, with these apps. So BCP is a good point, Val, in terms of just automatically calculating differentials. I know that it's the first time I've seen it, and in all our events, you always have a random 2, 3, 4 people who miscalculate or misenter their scores on the differential system. So that's great. And then just circling back to new recruit, just from like a bystander, interested bystander perspective, seeing the shift and the difference between the SBot 1 online and then number 2 in terms of how new recruit handles it and the features that seem to be available to you as like a TO to run that thing. It seems like they've made like some massive leaps and bounds in terms of just the tech behind the program.
Yeah, I mean, with the guys who run Warhol and New Recruit, they're separate entities. I think the New Recruit guys, are French, and then obviously Hugo's in Spain. Hugo's the lead developer on Warhol. They're businesses and shops. I'm not even sure if New Recruit's a full-time endeavor for whomever develops it, if it's a moneymaker for them, or if they're just cost neutral, whatever it is. But they're very responsive. Like, they're able to do things on a dime. BCP is just a bigger entity at this point. Like, they have, or at least it feels like, something that's a little less nimble at times. And again, like, New Recruit's literally, I think, something that was designed and created to support the Ninth Age community. And so they just have, like, just the way that it's set up is designed for games like Warhammer the Old World. And the fact that you have your army builder in there and that it can, check or at least validate to an extent lists and formatting and stuff like that just makes the user experience, I think, end to end just a lot more seamless and easier for TOs too. And they can do stuff like process payments, all the stuff that BCP can do. So I don't know. It feels like, as far as the app that specifically feels designed and supported for this game and this community and the incredible amount of tools it has, I really do feel like my future events will be run on New Recruit. And that's not to say BCP sucks. It did a great job.
Yeah.
As far as the event is concerned, I really loved that venue, despite its lack of an HVAC. I thought that was a big part of the vibe. I was worried that it would be deafeningly loud, but the loudness kind of was the same whether it was 2 people talking or apparently 150 people talking. So I don't know. I didn't have the hoarse voice that I expected to have, like I do at some events held in like hotel conference rooms and things like that. So I really love that venue. I'm hopeful that I can make the numbers work to run something that's more geared specifically just to Old World. Maybe hopefully bring on a partner who can run AOS, or maybe Lord of the Rings, make it more fantasy themed. I think that would be really sick. And something to look forward to in the future. Maybe even the spring.
Maybe. Are we getting a prime time announcement here, or?
I'm looking at it.
Podcast.
I have to talk to Andrew first.
Okay.
But I'm looking to see what we can make happen. Obviously, the more that you can show, I guess, more commitment you can make to a venue, I think, generally speaking, is better for you from a scale perspective as far as like rates and things are concerned. So hopefully, I think in my mind, putting an event in the spring and an event in the fall, and then CCBB in the summer, that would be pretty fucking sick.
Yeah, I think that'd be amazing. And locally here, we also have CTC in sort of the winter, or like very early spring. So we'd be locked down for GTs for sure. I think the venue, like I'd echo you. I think the venue is great. I've seen way louder venues, so it's So I was fine from my perspective. Thank you to the venue owners for providing us with a fan, as you mentioned. But I mean, aside from that, it was perfect for sure.
Get Shane a megaphone.
Actually, having a PA was on my list of shit, and I had that Bluetooth speaker, but it immediately failed. But yeah, some sort of a PA.
He had an unfortunate habit of putting his hand directly in front of his mouth when he was trying to yell. It was kind of comical.
Yeah, Shane. Yeah, Shane. I mean, I probably have. I maybe haven't said it enough, but Shane was like just an epic person. Who I met him through. I'm pretty sure I met him through SBot. Shane is actually a guy who builds mods for Tabletop Simulator, so TTS. So he's actually
Nice.
a TTS guy, and the first time I met him, he said that he, quote, had probably played more games of Old World than anyone else on the planet. And I was like, okay, coming in hot. All right then.
All right. Yeah.
But I think he probably wasn't boasting, or at least not full of shit. He definitely knows his stuff, and he's by education, he's a philosophy major. So what I enjoy about that is, although he does have like a very detailed understanding of the rules, he doesn't necessarily have any sacred cows, and he definitely understands how like different rulings can be seen by different people. So he just has a good mind, I think, for being a judge. He has a magic judging background. He was just such an epic guy to pick up and have their doing the real hard work of making those calls at the tables. I could have made them. Would they have been as agreeable and accurate? Definitely not. So me being relegated to ringer mode, which was necessary, was and him handling the judging, I think, was a good split of the duties on the day.
Yeah, I echo everything you said. I just have positive words for what Shane did. So hats off to him for sure. Okay, so shifting a little bit here to the much maligned tournament pack from our team here before the event. But more specifically, talking about scoring and the quote unquote comp that was present at SBot in Toronto. How did you guys feel that or did you feel that your games were impacted by tournament pack, comp, etc.? I'll start with you, Andrew, on this one.
In terms of the like comparant or like FAQ.
Yeah, FAQ and for example, VP points for monsters and stuff like that. Yeah.
I can't think of a game where it actually mattered. I guess no, what's the toughness on a Terrorgeist? 5, right?
Is it
6? I think it's
I was
6.
playing at 6.
I think it's
okay,
6.
maybe it's 6. So I think I got the Monster Slayer once in my last game, and other than that, it never came up. And any of like the sort of weird edge cases that the FAQ was trying to get like a clear definition on, at least for the event, I can't think of an instance where we were like, oh, we should check the FAQ. Like it never came up. So a lot of our armchair complaining in the pre-SBot episode, I guess, was a lot of just shaking fists at clouds, and it didn't really come up.
Terrorgeist is T6, by the way.
Okay, so I must have got the points for that. That game was a resounding 20-0 though for me anyway, so I don't think it would have mattered, but it did contribute to that in some effect. Other than that, like my games were so like clear won or lost based on like just the results of the game itself. Like any of the extra like, oh, I killed your general or whatever, like really didn't change the outcome of the event or that game, including like the extra points for like the Monster Slayer. Yeah, I don't think it really changed anything. I did have one criticism, and I've already talked to Val about this the night of. I found it weird how the pairings were based on wins first, and then like was the strength of schedule. So like
it was wins and losses, win path random.
Yeah, so like my first game, I like just barely won, and then my next opponent for game 2, he had like a 20-0 going into that. So like for me, it felt weird because it's like, well, he like smashed his opponent. So clearly he's probably a little bit better player. Whereas I kind of just squeaked out a win. I think it was like a 12-8 or like an 11-9. So it's like, shouldn't he be playing someone who also had a big win as opposed to me who like kind of struggled for that win? And now I'm going into a guy who's probably going to face fuck me. And he kind of did. Like it was close for a bit, but like the last 3 turns, it just completely flipped. So it's just like, well, should I have been playing that caliber of a player in that round?
You
But I
prefer
guess
to
everyone
face
else
fuck
was in the
rather
same boat.
than.
Sorry, Val, what was that?
No, just Andrew prefers to be the one doing the face fucking, I suppose.
Exactly.
And I understand. I think everyone feels that too. But
Exactly.
someone does have to be the face fucky occasionally.
I agree.
It happens to the best of us. Yeah.
I guess it was just like, should I have been paired with someone of that caliber?
So
Based on the win, but I understand the other reasoning for it, and you did have a big explanation of why like you did it that way, and that makes sense to me too. So I'm not like,
explanation. You know what, Andrew? I'd love to give a big explanation. And
all right, let's have
you
it.
know, I'll have at it. One is, and I think as I expressed to you, at some point the idea of submarining. And so so submarine can be a couple of different things. I think we'll all agree. One of which is just, you have a single loss, and especially if you're a victory points only tournament, you still wind up ahead of someone without a loss. But because of how pairings work in that situation, you play opponents that maybe aren't as good or weren't as top tier as people who maybe were on a perfect 5-0. So that's one version of submarining. The other version that became a little more nefarious, especially in the 40K scene when I was deep in 40K, were actually people who would very purposefully win by the smallest margin possible. And in so doing, ensure that they were paired up with people they could face fuck, and would exercise restraint and just go with pretty vanilla fellatio, so that way they would always be paired as long as possible against the least challenging opponent in that sort of perfect win column. And so we saw that in tournaments in the UK. We saw that actually happening at the LVO. Some notorious and semi-notorious players would exercise this, and the solution to it was doing random pairings within a win bracket. So all the 3-0 players are randomly paired against all the 3-0 players. When you add win-loss, when you add the win path, which is a Mike Brandt sort of pairing style, the idea there is that as the tournament progresses, you actually are paired against people who have had the exact same progression of wins and losses as you. The idea being a bit of social engineering that makes it so that you're playing against people in a similar headspace. You're not, if you go, there's a huge difference between two people who went 2-1, one of which lost the first and won 2, and someone who went 2-0 and lost 1. You're coming at that from one's coming from an emotional high to a low, the other one's feeling pretty good by then. So that's the idea of win path pairing and why we do random pairings within those win brackets. And that's the long-winded answer that Andrew was trying for me not to say.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to me. The only thing that I sort of thought of that was in slight disagreement, I guess, is I don't think the old world is, just by nature of being a straight kill point game and being so close combat centric, a game where you can reliably say, I'm going to score an 11-9 on this one. But I think generally speaking, I fully agree with you.
I think actually, because you can control your score by simply not killing things. I don't know. I would say that there is some controllability. I think the bigger thing is it really a problem at this level in the community? I would say no.
No.
But then I would also point out that eventually you're gonna rise to your highest level of incompetence, right? Eventually, you're either gonna win the tournament or you're gonna lose. So
yeah,
that's the way she's gonna go.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So who's next? Ryan, how did the tournament back? And go ahead, buddy.
So all in, as Andrew already said, like, I think I referred to the event specific FAQ once in the entire event because every opponent basically just ran on vibes.
Sure.
Which was fine. Like it was a nice backstop. And this is I realize this is like the complete opposite of how I tend to be about this subject, but I will compliment that it was a nice backstop for when you had that weird situation where you and your opponent's vibes are just not lining up anymore. But yeah, I referred to that like once. The actual like the extra points for killing monsters and things, I don't think ever came up. I only had 2 games that even had monsters in them. On my front, I didn't bring the Green Knight because I have a tendency to get him killed, and I didn't want to give up 69 points, just automatically. So that was a whole thing. And then lastly, as you'll see later in the episode, but I actually really liked your differential spread. And looking at the event results, it was very nice to see that the people in that like top 10 weren't just like 520 or 420 and a 16-5 or 16-4 or whatever. It was nice to actually see a spread of victory results because of how difficult it was to actually get 1900 points or more off of your opponent.
Yeah. Fair. Yeah, on my end, I think similar to both of you guys, my games are not super impacted meaningfully by the changes that were made to like scoring and stuff. I think I got the 50 victory points like 3 times throughout the tournament, and I never ran into the Green Knight specifically, so that was that. 50 victory points never really was enough to swing any of my games either. So I mean, that was just added. Added bonus points there, but it didn't really matter much. I guess on a philosophical level, though, and I said this before in the previous episode, 2 episodes ago, but I get the intent to have a bit of a counter argument to the T6 rideable monster meta type situation, but I guess my take on it is always that I feel like this is GW's job to fix and not a specific TO's job to fix, right? Where, and I'll keep harping on this until they eventually do something about it, but I feel like 99% of the problems with this game would be fixed with a quick points update from SDS there, and then we wouldn't have to do things like give bonus victory points for X, Y, and Z because it could be sorted out at the source. I don't know how you feel about that, Val.
Yeah, I mean, I feel. Look, the reality of it is, I use the word social engineering. The bonus was picked at a number that was not. It was intentionally meaningless for the most part. Sure. And also, I think the rewarding of victory points for killing the majority of a monster, and the 69 points, which I can't believe you didn't take the Green Knight because you were afraid of giving up 69 points. That's insane.
It wasn't fear.
That's
it was
insane.
spite. Fine.
Just that is insane. But the points of those are to give perhaps a little bit of consolation to people who might be frustrated or who have a feel bads moment against those things.
Yep.
And at least give some credit to the idea, because we don't want to do massive changes to comp like maybe Nova did. I do like to keep the game sort of at least in the lane, or at least in the same vicinity of what maybe the game designers had come up with. I think I do understand why that's important. And we're seeing that in SBOT too, like just the innovation of the meta right now outside of the IRL stuff, because people are playing with what they got and what they built to. But like free of sort of that production constraint, people are really innovating on lists that do address different things in the game. I think they result in things, in looks of the game that maybe are a bit, I guess, breaking of the verisimilitude of it. So
sure,
that sort of take you out of it. And I think you're right. Ultimately, it's up to the games designers to observe that, sort of list design and the types of armies that this rule set pushes players towards, and hopefully do something that might address that. And you're right, points changes. I think maybe even a healthy errata would be very much in order to address a lot of this stuff. And I think probably come February, we're playing a very different game. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
my biggest fear is that people play the game as is, out of the box, and they're like, this is bullshit. I hate it. I haven't actually seen that very often, but there are definitely people who have had like some hard lumps and don't like the look of the types of armies that are out there or whatever. So anything that we can do to gently nudge people in directions, or at least give them some flowers for accomplishing something in the game, I don't think as a TO that's a bad thing. You got to think of the player experience, and it's a balancing act because there are just things that are taboo to change or meddle with. We haven't done a Swedish comp style thing. We try to do any changes we try to do in the least amount of moves possible to keep things as close as possible to the way out of the box, while hopefully nudging people in a direction that makes it a little more palatable for even the entry level guys. So that's the spirit of what we do. If we achieve that with what we did and how we write things, maybe not, but that's definitely the spirit of it. And yeah, I somewhat understand the criticism, but like adding objectives to missions,
which we'll get into later.
That to me is a bigger deal than 50 fucking points. So
100% agreed. So yeah, and I guess like the sort of the thought that jumped to me when you're saying that, Val, is like the meta's absolutely not locked down for this game. I think your example for SBOT 2 is perfect in that, because people were concerned with, rightfully so, and that writable T6 2+5 plus 5+ monsters were sort of dominating the competitive space. People have shifted to the massive brick of archers with poison shots, 100 archers or whatever in their variety.
True Death Stars have entered the chat. Yeah,
exactly. Right. That's like the natural evolution. But what defeats that? It's MSU with first charge is a good example of what would take that down. And I think that's where people will pivot. And then what gets rid of MSU, you're back to monsters. So I think there's like a good rock, paper, scissors type situation here. The meta's not locked down. It's still very, quicksandy in terms of how solid it is. And I think things will keep naturally evolving. So I guess that was a bit of a philosophical take, but
no, I think it's absolutely true. And the other thing is just like the player skill, right? Like everyone's still figuring it is an arcane game. It is not written in a way that's easy to master. And people are still getting Shane was saying that like in the first couple of rounds he was answering like how do I charge something?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, as an organizer too, that's kind of the tier that a lot of people are at. So like even if we wanted to be more complicated, like people barely have a grip on what's written on the page, let alone the extra shit you want to add after the fact. So like that's probably why the FAQ didn't come up a lot, but it also having an FAQ even just for the judge is important.
Yep. Exactly.
Because if they're making a ruling, it's easy to make the same ruling differently in two different situations, right? So if you have a baseline, at least you have an ability to be consistent, and that's why we have it.
Yep, and you're, from my own personal experience, you're entirely correct in that, like, I've got to take a step back sometimes and check my, I play a lot of games and I talk about this a lot, privilege, and understand that like basically every single event I've gone to, I've been answering, more, I don't want to say basic questions, but questions like about what's written on the page, just because, as you said, it's a lot for people to go through and people have different amounts of time to give to the hobby and they play different amounts of games. And so, yeah, we're not at that level yet where the fact that you produced for SBOT Online, I take, but originally is relevant to most gamers in an average game. So
they're gonna go with the vibes.
Yeah,
they're gonna go with what they assume they read. And usually, what's interesting, I think, and a credit to this rule set, is that it seems to work somehow. I don't know. I don't remember this. Like the last rules that I played that was anything like this was 7th edition 40k, and it was not like the vibes did not work. Like,
Yeah, you're
like
right.
the answers were like there were as vague scenarios and interactions as probably more actually, but like there were just unsolvable riddles in very core situations that existed in 7th that both players would not arrive at the same conclusion for, if you know what I mean. Like, and whereas in the old world, I feel like a lot of the times, like both players kind of know what they like, kind of, I don't know, just feels like they can just sort of feel what they're supposed to happen, which is weird.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I think also the community is super cooperative, which helps that. I think there's 2-3 times in the tournament where my opponent and I had a different interpretation, and literally those 3 times were resolved by, twice my opponent being like, yo, you would just want to roll for it, and we sorted it that way, so.
Yeah. That is a tried and especially if you're in like a, if you're in a situation where it's like, okay, we can go around circles and look at the book, or we can just solve this quickly, like that genuinely works.
It does. Ryan, were you trying to add something in there? I saw you speak up for a bit.
No, I was just laughing.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I think we've beat this horse to death. One other thing I'd like to get everybody's opinion on is because it was my first time playing with the square-based trademark terrain layout picking system. Like, do you guys think it works well? Is this a terrain setup system that you prefer? Are you more into the book, the big blue book terrain placement setup, or maybe picking layouts by the tournament organizer before the game starts? So how do you all see the square-based terrain layout picking system, starting with Andrew? Sorry, Ryan. Let's start with Ryan.
Sure. So I think it worked well. I'm actually kind of ambivalent about terrain placement systems. Like, honestly, if I had my way and we had unlimited, funds for event terrain, and maybe it's just because I'm old, but it would just be a whole bunch of preset tables, which I understand there's a whole bunch of like feels bad about I wound up on the table that was not suitable for the matchup I was playing, etc.
Sure.
And I do love Val's, to use his comment of social engineering. The great thing about the system that they've devised is it gives the players the illusion of a choice that makes them feel like the battlefield is influenced by their decisions, which it is largely, but it makes them feel like it matters. Sure. I do think it worked better than player placed, because very quickly people just started gaming, myself included, when I built a fence down the middle of the table, started gaming the player placed terrain. And it's, much like not pre-measuring in days of old. Is that a game that needs to be bolted onto the game? Not really. You're just adding more things for someone to be good at that their opponent isn't.
I just wanted to, like, play a little devil's advocate. I do find the criticism of player place terrain, which is that one, which is like it's a mini game outside of the game. Well, like that maybe made sense in 40k once upon a time because it was a community rule. But in this game, it is in the rules, and it is how they intend terrain to be set up, and it is a game within a game that they very much have in the rules. So
absolutely, but that was also the case in 40k for 20 years, and yet we didn't have player placed terrain until like 2014.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just it's an interesting criticism. Although I guess it also can wind up though with like some serious feel bads if you fuck it up. And
that's why I think back to my one game where I just cut my opponent's army in half with terrain, and you couldn't do anything about it.
I mean, he could have done something about it because he placed half that terrain. But so I guess, like, if we say that placing terrain is a mini game, I think the individuals who have the knowledge required to win the terrain placing game probably also have the knowledge required to pick the best of 3 terrain setups for their matchup. So anyways.
One thing actually that you guys called out a lot, I did it with very little thought, but basically my missions that I rolled with were quite simply open order with a twist, and the twist was using the using the deployments that they offered in the rule book, and you guys were harping a little bit on the fact that the deployment zones were potentially close to one another on at least two of them. And I'm curious to know if you guys figured out that you could just not deploy on the line, and whether or not your opponents also figured that out.
My opponent did not figure that out. I deployed on the line because Bretonia.
Yeah.
My opponent also deployed on the line and suffered for it until I stopped being able to roll dice. But that game was just also embarrassing for me because I definitely lost to a dude who forgot an entire 230 point model.
I mean, yeah, for me it was matchup dependent. Obviously, deployment is such a critical part of the game if you want to have any chance of winning reliably. So yeah, I mean, most games, just because of my army composition and the opponent's army, I ended up deploying pretty deep in my zone. So yeah, I caught on to it, and my opponents also caught on to it. They I think most people I ran into ran some pretty aggressive armies, but for instance, Timur had a sort of stay-at-home army, and he deployed deep in his zone also. So I think that's pretty widely understood across the community.
Cool.
My
Andrew.
game against Cleary, he was running Tomb Kings, and it was on the diagonal one with like a foot difference, and my options were deploy on the line and try to get to him as quickly as possible, or hide in my back zone behind the forest and the woods that basically was on the edge of my deployment zone. I opted to get into him quickly, and he just kind of corner castled at the very far back of his deployment zone and just blew me off the board before I can get to him. So like he definitely clued in, and like for me it was just a race, and I lost that race.
Sure. Yeah. I guess on my side for terrain picking, I'm not super sold on the system that was used. I'm not entirely I'm not against it, tear my shirt off type situation. Like it's fine. I just found it a little bit tedious to set up because invariably my games with my opponent like the terrain setup phase turn into, is that 17 inches on this side and 15 inches on that side, or no, I think that's like 19. Oh, okay, and then like you spend all this time trying to measure it perfectly, whereas the base rule book is very, as we've mentioned a million times tonight, like very vibes based of like, yeah, I'll just put a forest here, and it tends to be a lot less cognitive intensive and a lot quicker to sort of go through. So I guess that would be my criticism of it, and the reason why it's not my absolute preferred terrain setup system. But I'm not like, if you told me, Val, I'm doing the exact same thing next year for terrain setup, I'd sort of shrug and be like, okay, cool. But I guess that is my criticism of it.
I think it comes from a place. This is actually not something I'm actually probably I'm totally fine with player place terrain. Not gonna lie. This is a passionate point Rob has, who's my co-host on Squarebase. Yeah. And for Rob, he really believes that preset terrain is super important, and that you wouldn't set up the map when you're playing StarCraft or something like that. Like it's designed as part of the way the game unfolds, and so I think that's part of it. The thing though, and I think it was Ryan who said, talking about how if you had your druthers, you'd have preset terrain. In the battle days, when that's the way tournaments were, what invariably happened would be that those tables would be meticulously set up by the TO, and then some dork would put their army down on the table, push anything that was in the deployment zone into the middle of the table. And then invariably in the course of the first round, all of those things would sort of get smooshed around. And so whatever the carefully laid out terrains would be undone within a round of the tournament. And then may or may not be placed back afterwards. So by having the terrain picking system, what you're actually engineering is that the tables are reset every round. and you have preset maps. So that's really what you're trying to achieve with that.
Yeah, I guess my sort of counterpoint to Rob's perspective on this is like the GW ecosystem tends to have a lot of, these are maps that we sort of lay out before the game, and we don't necessarily player place. But once you step out of the GW realm, there's like a lot of, especially historical games and stuff, that tend to rely on player place terrain, and it works for them. So it's not a, this can't work type situation. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's
I think I agree with you on that.
okay. All right. So let's park this. So closing out on S-Bot, anything anybody else wanna shout out about the tournament or say before we move on to the team tournament?
Well, I'll give my opinion on player place terrain in the past.
Sorry, I skipped you, buddy. My bad.
I actually like the maps better than player placed.
Okay.
Just from my experience running CCBB and seeing a few players game the player placed system to make weird setups, or in the case of one game, they forgot that there was a minimum distance, so they actually like ruined their own game for themselves by putting like kind of everything in the middle. I think due to GW, my guess is the playtesters don't have a lot of tournament focus or think about that type of thing. So when they're playing or trying out things at like the design studio, my guess is they're player placing terrain, but by vibe. So like, oh, this map will look cool if we put this forest here, and they're not trying to game the player placement part of the rules. And I think because of that, it doesn't actually work that well for tournaments. So I do like the fact that there was preset maps. And even if it was just like one map per table per game because all the terrain was the same, like I would have been fine with that. But I do like that the TO has in some way shaped the way every map's going to play, and that also makes sure that everyone's kind of playing at least a very similar map, so it's not the table isn't going to fuck or like the way it's set up isn't going to screw someone over because one player set it up one way to their advantage. Like everyone's kind of on the same playing field in terms of how every map is very similar on every table, so I like that aspect of it.
Something too about the way that the actual rulebook is written is, and it's a question of like, I assume the playtesters don't have this privilege, but certainly the studio guys would, which is it's actually you take all of the terrain you have available. So that could be a studio's beautiful shelf of like beautiful sculpted terrain and rivers and all that kind of stuff. And then you put it out alternatingly until you get to the amount of pieces that is prescribed by the size of the table and the amount of points.
Yeah.
So like in that version of the game, you could be playing, even if you are trying to game it. If someone is gaming you, you can counter with 4 fucking impassable buildings or something, and they probably wouldn't play them as a pad. They'd probably play them as occupiable buildings, which is an option we haven't used yet. So like there would be counterplay available to you just because you have not exactly 6 pieces to work with, and like putting out 3 pieces each. You have 25 pieces to choose your 3 pieces from, which is a very different situation too.
Yep. No, that's a great point. And just circling back, Andrew, to what you said about how the studio thinks about it, I think you're right in that they don't think about it from a competitive perspective. And to be clear, I think that's the right way of approaching it, because the overwhelming majority of games of the old world are not played in a competitive setting. So just, I think not over focusing on this is a good design choice. So yeah, and Val, you're 100% on there. I think in terms of if you have an infinite pit of perfect terrain to pick to place out 6 it's a completely different story than when an event needs to, fill 40 tables worth of terrain with 6 pieces each, basically.
Yeah, and you have, there's 2 forests. So if one guy puts out 2 forests, he got all the forests. If you have a wall with unlimited forests, it's different. One thing I would say on the because this is a bugaboo of mine. Warhammer is a game that's played between 2 players and 1 person wins. So it is always set up as a competitive game, and I would say that there's lots of guidance in Old World, specifically in the BRB, in the opening chapter, that speaks to the fact that it's, you're supposed to get the rules right. And like, here's what a take back means. Like, there's words to the effect that explain, I think, a mentality of someone at Games Workshop who actually did go to tournaments. Are they necessarily like the like knife's edge meta style that we see now in AOS and 40K, where that evolved to? Maybe not, but I think this is definitely someone who expects this game to be played competitively, and who is designing with that intention in mind. But that is my take, because although people do play it casually, like, someone always loses. The magical narrative gamer, I don't think, really exists.
No, nor does the casual gamer, for that matter.
Yes.
After you've invested $1,000 and hundreds of hours of your time.
Yeah, there's nothing casual about Warhammer. That's for damn.
No.
I mean, it's also significantly easier to take a competitively functional rule set and do weird, fun garage shit with it than it is to do the opposite.
Yeah.
I used to believe that. I'm just contradicting you guys left, right, and center. But like, and I only saying this, Ryan, because of where 10th edition 40K and where AOS have gotten to.
That's fair. No, I think they are definitely the exception that break the rule on that one.
Like, because I used to say that it's a careful what you wish for situation, because I would argue that till I was blue in the face for years. Like, what are all these quote casuals and narrative players complaining about? Just play with the rule set. Like, a tight rule set can be played narratively. A loose rule set is tough to play competitively. And like,
so I think
the tightening actually, I feel like, has legitimately taken some of that flavor out of the, like, the vibes are gone for some people in those other games. Not saying they're entirely gone, but
so I wholeheartedly agree with that point, but I think the issue isn't the tightness of the rules, it's the fact that the rules of, say, modern 40K are no longer specifically attempting to simulate something.
Fair.
Like, yeah, you're exactly
playing a game, but the game is no longer, I'm telling a story on this tabletop with my Space Marines killing your Necrons. It's, I'm farming magical points. Like, it's...
And I mean that bit's a bit reductionist, but regardless, I agree with you, Ryan. I think the overall game design has shifted. The way I like to explain it is they've removed the RPG-esque elements from their 2 mainline games, and they've become like more, I think, board gamey in a way, right? In terms of like, and it goes all the way from unit / box design choices, so I did play a little bit of 10th when it dropped, where I couldn't take Terminators, Chaos Terminators, how I wanted, because the box came with one dude had a power sword and a plasma gun, and the next dude had 2 claws, and like I no longer had that space to design things as I wanted to my dude it, right? And then so that's like one sort of the aspect of it, and then it goes all the way to, Ryan, what you're referring to in terms of like the interactions between the armies are less important and detailed, because what we're focusing on here is how do you score points in this sort of like, again, I keep using the word board gamey type way, but I think just the overall design, narrative and choices have shifted entirely.
Whatever the je ne sais quoi is between a war game and a board game, because there's absolutely nothing wrong and unsatisfying with a board game, but whatever that je ne sais quoi, whatever that element is, they seem to have taken it one step beyond. And again, it's legitimately a vibes thing, and it would be so hard to quantify. But I find myself more and more finding it hard to say a lot of the old things that I used to say, because I sympathize a little bit with it now, especially going back to something like Old World, and you have that like that big meaty burger with the fucking tomato and the lettuce and the onion, and it's just greasy and all over your face. Like that's like army writing is just all these like incredibly generally speaking meaningless but seemingly important micro decisions that you get to make and play with.
Yeah.
And you kind of lose that when you get that more I don't know,
Streamlined,
plug and
slick.
play
Yeah.
type thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. 100% agreed. Like even just things going back to your data slate or your unit card has all the rules on it, right? And you can just pick that up. You know the 3 or 4 rules that apply, and you move on type situations. Rather than the conundrum that is understanding just the basic rule book for old world and wrapping your head around that, right? So it's a completely different philosophy, and I think you hit it on the head there in terms of like the secret sauce has been modified one step further than what we classically understand as being a war game, basically.
Cool conversation, you guys.
Yeah, I didn't think we'd be going down that road, but that's the beauty of live podcasting. Okay, cool. So SBOT, sorry, what was that, buddy?
I said so teams, eh?
Yeah, so teams, exactly. Okay, so exactly, teams. So let's shift over to the Old World Team Tournament that we're going to be having here in Ottawa in the month of May 2025. And I'll fire this off to Andrew to give us sort of the basic details surrounding the event.
Yeah, so it's a team event. For the past X amount of years, 7 or 8, it's been 40K centric, focused around the ETC style of play. So they do like 8-man teams of 40K, and you play as a team and you have different pairings. Originally, Canhammer Team Tournament started as a fantasy event way back in 8th, and it was a 4-man teams format. I can't remember if we were using the WTC, which was like a precursor to the ETCs, style of list making, because they had their own weird like comp pack for lists and rules for pairings. I think we kind of made our own for that event. If I think back, I could probably ask Chris someday.
Was it? I think it was a practice event for the Canadian ETC team, wasn't it? But it could not really because it was 4 people.
I don't think so. I don't think we had a Canadian team. I think back in the day, the Canadian team was just a few Canadians who were living in the UK, and then the joke was that the Canadian team was just the UK B team because most of their guys were just from the UK who were like mercenaries on like the 2 Canadian guys who lived in the UK to begin with the team. I don't think we actually had like a formal Team Canada for WTC back in the day. I wasn't super heavy involved, so maybe I'm wrong there. I'm just kind of going off vague, shadowy memories from over 10 years ago at this point. So
I know that by the end of 8th, it was Chris Haynes era because my friend Caleb played on that team and it was fantasy. I don't know how that related. I don't know how that related to CHTT though.
I think it was that happened after. Because the original like CHTT wasn't even run by us technically. Like we supplied some terrain and like had like the Canhammer logo on it, but it was a friend of Chris's who was running it because it was out of Waterloo, which is close to Toronto. That's where it was ran, and it was kind of to be like a big event for Toronto area, but using like Canhammer branding and stuff like that. Anyways, this event coming up, so it's May 4th and 5th. It's going to be here in Ottawa. We're at the EY Center where we've been for almost ever. For those of you who are at Capital City Bloodbath, we do have the big hall again this year. We've signed contracts. It's for sure happening in the big hall, so we're not going to be pushing that little side room again. So we'll have ample space for both the Old World and 40K events. Based on our terrain inventory, we can do 10 teams of 4, I believe. Yeah. And then maybe I can convince Val to bring some up, and if we have to, we can bump up the size of the team cap. But right now we're kind of stuck based on how much terrain we have.
So sorry, how many tables do you expect to? How many teams do you expect to have right now? Sorry, I missed that part.
10.
10?
Yeah.
40 tables? Cool.
It would be 20 tables, but yeah.
20 tables? Yeah.
20
got it.
tables. Everyone doesn't get their own table.
Got
That'd be crazy. So yeah, right now we can cap it at 10, so 40 people. Maybe we can scrounge some more up, but I'd rather be conservative on that and not have either bad tables or undue expectations from us that we can't live up to. So right now we'll say 10, maybe more, but just buy your tickets early. Points values will be 2,000 point teams, and we are looking at probably 6 games. We could probably get away with 5, but I know the 40K side is going to want us to match their schedule, and they're for sure doing 6 games. So right now it's up in the air how many. We're either doing 5 or 6. Honestly, I'd push for 6 just so people kind of get their money's worth and have 6 games over a weekend. But it will skew results because we have less than 32 teams. So that's going to be weird. And it's going to really depend on what the 40K guys say about that. Yeah.
Would it matter? Would it matter to end earlier on Saturday?
Not really. It's just better for the people there, right? It's not the 4-game grind in one day, especially because the rounds are going to be a little longer to accommodate like the pairings and stuff. So I think it's going to be like 3-hour rounds or 3.5-hour rounds. So that's we're looking at almost a 12-hour day of gaming, not including breaks and lunch. So if we can get away with 3 in one day, that's probably better for the players.
I stressed over the 5 or 6 question, and I'm so happy I went with 5. I'm not gonna lie, just for the SBOTO, just for the tier of where people are at. That was a lot. That was a lot. And if it's 10 teams, you don't even really. There's no real reason to do 6.
Yeah, 100%. So again, it's more directives from the 40K side of things because they want everything to kind of match up. Especially in terms of pricing for tickets, which we're still discussing, so I don't have any answers on that yet. But for them, it's value per game. That's one of the sort of breakdowns we use for costing, on top of the cost of just the event hall and shit. So that's up in the air on how many rounds there will be, but at least 5, maybe 6. But I think we can get away with 5. I mean, I can basically do what I want anyway, so I can just push for 5. But we'll see. That's basically the rundown of the basics of the team tournament. It's nice to bring it back after all these years to the event, since the foundation of Canhammer was deeply rooted in fantasy and 8th Ed in particular. So it's nice to go back to our roots.
Love it. Awesome. And then I guess I was going to ask Ryan first, but it might be better for you, Andrew. So, whichever of you guys feels more comfortable, jump in here. But where did the idea of running a team tournament originally come from? And then as a follow-up to discuss, how do you guys feel as, the game is fairly new there? How well do you think the old world is suited to a team format? So either Ryan or Andrew.
I can hit this one, Andrew, if you want. But
yeah, I'll chime in after then.
Okay. So this specifically started in February. The game had been out for a month, with Danny and Cleary asking about it. Probably to the point where Andrew was getting annoyed because he kept saying we don't even know if the game will be big enough to support doing this, all of these other things. But that's kind of what precipitated Danny and I starting to work on this document that we're going to talk about over the rest of the episode. But that's and obviously all of the context before that, team, tabletop wargaming teams competition is intrinsically rooted to fantasy, because the ETC grew out of was created, and I want to say 7th Ed fantasy era, possibly earlier.
I want to say it goes back to almost 2000, dude. Like it's
Yeah,
probably
it
like
really
straight
is.
ahead.
Yeah, but like fantasy is what that whole thing was built around, and like to the point where the WTC split off from ETC, which technically still exists after the death of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, because no one could agree on what game was to be the successor. It caused a whole bunch of weird infighting, and that's why 40K just like took its ball and made a whole separate event.
Sure.
I was previously involved with the Flames of War ETC team peripherally, so weirdly involved in all of that drama.
The first ETC that they have on their history page is 2006.
There we
So
go.
it'll be 6th dead. Yeah.
But yeah, so fantasy and like the question of like does it work for Old World, I think is answered by the fact that teams play of these types of games was really created for Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and the Old World is not so substantially different from Warhammer Fantasy Battle that I think the wheels aren't going to fall off by doing this.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Sure. Cool.
Andrew?
Yeah, I guess a more specific to this event. So after the last Canhammer team tournament, which was I guess right after Old World, or like a month or two after Old World officially dropped, and there was a lot of hype around it. Well, there still is, but one of the organizers for Canhammer team tournament, Jason Sparks, was like, next year we should add Old World to this too. I'm like, well, it's a new game. I don't know how many people we have. And then in conversations with Ryan and Danny, that sort of picked up steam. And then I offhandedly made a remark to Val, who just started hounding me about it too. I figured like, well, let's give it a try. I wasn't too confident in my ability to write a proper team format and pack for that. So thankfully, Ryan took the reins on that and made it happen. And I talked with the other organizers for Canhammer Team Tournament, and they're just like, well, we have basically unlimited space again, so you can do what you want. And I'm like, okay, cool. Gives me something to do, because once the organizing and setup for the 40K event is done, like all the back end stuff, I don't really have much to do during the event because I'm not a big 40K player. I don't know enough of the game to like be a proper rules judge. Like I did some paint judging, and I do a lot of the social media and like photos for the event, but like during the event I'm kind of just hanging out. So it gives me something to do as well at that event, which is nice.
Cool. I guess sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just endorsing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak to the idea of where the team tournament came from, but I think just going back to how well will Old World run for a team event, I think it will run very well, in short. But one of the interesting dynamics, I think, surrounding the Old World is the fact that it's a kill points based game. That's so it obviously differs quite significantly from objective based games, which are the ones I've looked at in closer detail for team based events. So I think it really shifts the discussion specifically in a team format where, traditionally you'd be talking about attacker defender type lists, but in a kill point context, it really like modifies that discussion. So I think you end up with a discussion that revolves more around matchups rather than like specific list archetypes. But those are just some overall thoughts as we get going here. We're going to discuss this in more detail down the episode there. But Val, on your end, any thoughts on the Old World as a team-based platform?
Well, we talked about the sort of the nature of how it's becoming, the meta's evolving into a pretty decent rock, paper, scissory type thing.
Yeah.
And I think that makes for excellent team-based games. And then also because it's kill points and the way that you can build quite literally attacker and defender style lists. I think it suits. It's a very natural evolution of the game, and Ontario specifically is very horny for team events. So I think it's a very natural thing to do.
There you go. Awesome. Okay, so Ryan, since this is a little bit your brainchild, why don't you run us through the basic tenets of like team composition for the tournament? So faction representation, items, allies, mercenaries, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so this event, we may eventually change team size, but for this year, we're looking at doing 4-person teams. It's a double logistical choice, just for a bit of explaining. Firstly, I we'll talk about this when we get to terrain, but to make all of the fixed terrain boards, there was a limit to how many unique boards we could create with the terrain Andrew already possesses. So four is what I worked out. And additionally, 4 people fit generally in one car, which makes people traveling logistically simpler for bringing your team to Ottawa. That's that. So teams of 4, you will each have a 2,000 point army. Within that team of 4 people, no faction may be repeated in any way. And by faction, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what the exact term they use here, but like any combination of Grand Army or Army of Infamy for a specific grouping, Wood Elves, Bretonnians, etc. So you can't repeat within a team. This event does allow allies, and if you take an allied contingent of a faction, that counts as a use of that faction for your team. So if I bring Bretonnians with Wood Elf allies, nobody else on the team can have Bretonnians or Wood Elves, full stop.
I had a question about that.
Yeah.
When I was reading the pack. So, what about armies that share units? So, Warriors of Chaos and Beastmen, for example, share like the
Those
Chaos Spawn and Dragon
so
Ogre. Do those
those
count as 2
units.
separate armies, or is it still like a paired army?
Nope. So like Dragon Ogres exist as a discrete entity in both, even though they're only published in one spot in a book. Um, Dragon Ogres are a choice that is both available to Warriors of Chaos and Beastmen, and they don't count as using the other army for the purpose of what I'm explaining.
Okay.
All right, on perfect. Okay.
Yeah. I debated doing that, and I realized it was just way too complicated and kind of punitive.
I'm
So
like thinking like Kevin with his Chaos Dwarves, he can take a lot of orcs, so that means like Chaos Dwarves and orcs can't be on the same team. So yeah, that's kind of a question that popped in my head.
No, so yeah, if it's built into the army list, not in the allied slot or the mercenary slot, then it's fine. This is the easy way to look at it. Additionally, mercenaries are allowed. They do not count as a use of a faction. However, no 2 armies in a team can take the same mercenary units. So the best example I can come up with is like you can't have Imperial Dwarf Spearmen in an Empire list and in a Dwarf list. Like you can't take that unit entry in 2 different armies. But you could take 2 units of it in your Empire army if you really wanted to. I don't actually think anyone's going to do that, but it's just there. So that's the macro of that piece. Additionally, and this is the part that fills my heart with joy, but will probably make some people sad, non-common magic items, those not marked with an asterisk, are 1 instance per team. So your entire team can have 1 Ogre Blade and 1 War Banner, but could have, 11 Swords of Might. But the whole team can only have 1 of the really cool shit.
I like that. It's fun.
Yeah. And then carrying on with composition stuff, I kind of clarified exactly how allied contingents work because I think it's not well articulated in the rulebook, and then the FAQ makes reading the rulebook even harder. So we just go on to explain that, like, yes, you still have, if you take allies, you have to take a character and a non-character unit. You have to meet all of the percentage requirements of the keep trying to say org chart, but army list that you're using, and the minimums, the maximums, etc. And because your allied contingent is only 500 points, anything that is like X per 1,000 points would not be an eligible choice. And lastly, we're using the rule of 3 and 6 that we're all very familiar with. You can't take any more than 3 of character, special, rare, or mercenary units as an entry, nor can you take more than 6 of a core entry. The only place I went a little bit different than some other people is that if you have the option to exist in, say, like, what's a good example? Sisters of Avalorn, where you can be core and rare. You go with the lower limit. So
Sure.
Even if you're taking them as core, you're still only getting 3 units of Sisters of Avalorn in your army.
Instead of 4.
And then a last clarification is, because all the characters are kind of like smashed together into what looks like one unit entry, things like Bretonnian lords, a duke, a baron, and a paladin are all separate unit entries for the purposes of this rule. So, like, the rule of 3 doesn't mean that you can't have a duke, a baron, and 2 paladins, because I've had some
Sure.
people try and argue that for some reason.
That's
it on
interesting.
Team Comp.
That's an interesting point that I've never. I guess the vibes. I have never raised that question for whatever reason.
Well, I mean, when you look at them in the army composition lists, it's obvious that they're, to me anyway, that they're separate entries, because take Bretonnia, for example. It says you may have 0 to 1 Duke, you may have 0 to 1 Baron per 1,000 points, and you may take Paladins. So that to me indicates that they're 3 separate things, even though they're just one unit entry that says Lords of Bretonnia and then just has like a whole bunch of stuff.
And like something like Orc Boys are not like that because they're just listed as Orc Boys.
Exactly.
They
So
are
like
in fact like
Boys,
17
Big
different.
Guns, and Savage
Right,
Orcs are all actually the same thing.
Got it. All right, cool. All right. So yeah, that's okay. That's spelling out some of that. Maybe cool.
Andrew,
So that's it from composition.
Awesome. Andrew, any thoughts on that composition piece?
I like it, and after I had a bit of time to stew on it, I'm like I was kind of taken aback by the only one magic, like non-common magic items per army, because like in my head it's like, well, I kind of need those to make my fucking army work, and if I take them all, then my teammates can't. But after I had time to sort of step back from that initial reaction and think about it, I'm like, that's actually cool, because now it's going to make people think outside of the box. And I feel like in this format anyway, people are going to be taking armies that maybe aren't their usual like single player tournament list. So I can picture one team saying like, okay, we're going to take dwarfs who might not compete well in a singles format, but it's like they're going to be our blocker. So we're going to make the hardest dwarf list to kill, maybe big blocks or unkillable like dwarf thanes or whatever they're called.
And Doom Seekers.
And Doom Seekers, yeah, just that weird points denial shit. And it's like, cool, we're going to put it up against their hardest hitting army to take them out of like, to basically like nullify that win. And like, I think you're going to see more like rock, paper, scissors lists because of that. And they're going to try to go for favorable matchups. So I'm like, well, that's probably going to work out better. And I like the fact that it's just not every army is going to be the exact same now. So after I had time to think about it, I'm like, yeah, that's actually pretty cool. So I do think this is really good. And I like that it's very like clear and concise. So people don't have any like weird, like, oh, I thought I could do that on my list. Like everything's laid out. Other than my one question, which you cleared up. So yeah, I dig it.
Awesome. On my end, like the no repeated factions just makes a ton of sense. So obviously, I think everybody's on board with that one. In terms of allies, I find it a bit of an interesting take, Ryan. I'm not generally down with allies for a bunch of reasons that have been voiced ad nauseum online. That being said, if it restricts the choices for the rest of your army, sure, I'm more than willing to roll with it and see how it shakes out. And then for items, I think the one of each non-common item is an amazing choice. I love it. I think if I recall correctly, for the SBOT TO, we had 21 ruby rings and 20 talismans of protection across like 50 players. So obviously these items are a bit on the undercosted / just too good side. So having that brought down to one per team, I think is just a fantastic choice.
Actually,
lore familiar would be another good example. Sorry,
yeah,
Val?
there's actually, now that you mention it, there's some absolutely critical things.
Yeah.
That does make it interesting. But I am a big believer in economy of choice. So like I think limited choices make for better games. So I think, and it's also creates a fun mini game between you and your teammates in haggling and justifying who gets to use what, and that's only a good thing.
Yeah, fully agreed. Any other thoughts, Val, on like composition on your end?
So I guess my number one question would be, why rule of three, but yes, allies?
So the reason that we went yes allies was, one, because of that pitfall of I want to take allies and locks out an entire other player's like army option. And honestly, I don't think the way the allies rules are written, I don't think allies substantially break the game, because with 500 points, by the time you buy even a cheap character and the minimum core, you're often not able to put the other, like, no one's adding 2 Hellblaster volley guns with their allies because you literally can't, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the Doom scenarios actually violate the rules for allies as published in the core rules and as clarified in this document. As to rule of three, I actually originally left it out, and then Danny messaged me and was like, what about 16 Tomb Scorpions? And because Cleary exists, the rule of three lives. But
Yeah.
it was not in the first 3 drafts of this document. But some people came up with some fairly compelling Doom scenarios, so I put it back in.
That was on our drive back from the SBOT TO. I was in the car with Danny and Cleary, and I just bitched and moaned as per usual about how the rule of three prevents me from taking 4 bolt throwers because the army comp is 0 to 2. And then Cleary said, well, you can have 4 bolt throwers, but then I can take 14 Tomb Scorpions. And I was like, okay, keep the rule of 3. Like immediately, I was like, no, this is a world I don't want to live in. So screw that. And I think
so many Dragon Ogre Startax.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, Ryan, like you, as I was listening to you there, like you brought an interesting point is, a lot of the scenarios we're afraid of in terms of allies is people picking the good things out of some select armies. So, just thinking back to myself here as a Chaos Dwarf player, the sexy thing I can take from allies is that level 5 Scenecaster with the Infernal Puppet from Warriors of Chaos, but which fits in the point allotment and stuff. Now, the issue with this team construct, as you've shaped it, Ryan, is that actually on my 4-person team, I want a Warriors of Chaos player. I don't want to take a unit from that book with an item. I actually want that full-fledged army because it's one of the top performing armies. So I think it will actually work the more I think about it.
Question.
Exactly. We give you choices to cause you agony.
Okay, comment then a question. Comment first. So I think for me, the reason why I think allies are a bad idea in singles is that it would create homogenization. So you would have, I think, you would have like you mentioned, certain combinations of armies would just immediately be the best choices. It would be fun in the like 10 minutes it would take to figure all that out. But like any forces of good army would have a falcon horn, that kind of a
100%.
thing. And 2 bombards. So that's the type of shit that why I don't like it. And I saw that in 8th edition, and portions of 9th edition 40k.
Yep.
Actually, just for the 8th edition 40k. I saw what like just unbridled factions does, and generally speaking, people don't like it. The vibes are bad. It doesn't look right. And it's a thing that's cool to do in a game that you design with a friend. Like these two armies are working together. You're gonna fight those two armies. It's gonna be sick.
Sure.
But like in a competitive environment, you narrow what is good. You narrow the choices. Why I don't think it's bad here is that because you're not allowed to have multiple instances of the same faction and multiple instances of the same unique items, the things that I think would really drive that homogeneity are gone. So I will give you a pass on the allies and a tip of the cap to also including rule of 3-6. It was a trap question. You handled yourself admirably.
Also, just for clarity, there would be 0 bombards in that Bretonian list because there's 0 per 1,000.
Oh, actually, that was a comment I was going to make. That I think I think you're wrong on how you read that, because if
The
if
FAQ says it explicitly.
oh, is that from their FAQ?
Yes, from GW's FAQ.
Because
I had it the other
would mean
way.
that you're
and
only
then
allowed to
Darko
have
told me I was an idiot.
that would mean that you'd only be allowed to have one bombard in a 2,000 point army. Am I wrong?
No, so it was specifically for allied. Like the FAQ was germane to allied contingents, and the question was if an allied contingent is 500 points. For units that are X per 1,000 are using the size of the allied contingent or the size of the army. And it said use the size of the allied contingent, which means your allied army is not 1,000 points and therefore cannot include anything that is X per 1,000 points.
Okay. Well, maybe it is I. Stand it then.
But no, I thought it was the other way around too, and then I had 2 different people look at this and be like, no, and they sent me the screen cap of the FAQ.
Yeah, fair point. I did have another question, but I did have a question after my statement, but I got so enamored in my words that I forgot what I was going to ask. So we'll move on.
Awesome. That's fine. Okay, so Andrew, you want to walk us quickly through how, like, the broad strokes of how the pairing systems will work for this?
Yes, once I reopen the page. Okay.
Oh, actually, I do have one.
Okay, shoot.
Our friends, the Renegades, have boneheaded restrictions on allies. For example, demons can't ally with Warriors of Chaos.
Yeah.
Would you consider going back into some older sources and adding logical allies to the Renegades?
I'm not opposed. That's certainly a discussion Andrew, myself, and a few other people could have.
Thank you.
It could also just be the cost of doing business and being like, well, demons don't get allies, right? So
Nah, that's lame.
Yeah. Like
okay,
it works out. It works out both ways, but I'm not like emotional about it.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. I feel like if there's a place for the community, and I'm willing to give them until January on this, but I think if there is a place for the community to be a little more in the shit, I do think the Renegades might be that place.
Sure.
Like I assume vampire accounts will just get gutted in a Phantom update, just like they did to Lizardmen and Skaven. But I also secretly hope that they just get secretly updated in a reasonable way. But things like allies, they deleted any allied potential from some of those army lists to remove them from the game. So I think that's bullshit, and I will always be fighting for my Renegade brothers.
Fair. Okay. All right. Moving on a little bit here. How do you guys see and we've touched a little bit on this, but how do you see the old world as a game and how it's designed impacting team construction, attacker defender lists, what type of, setup you bring with your 4-person team there? Especially in the context of a kill points based system. Starting with Ryan. Sorry?
I did cut off Andrew as he was about to explain how pairings worked.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, you're right. You're entirely right. My bad.
Thanks, bud. So you rock up to your table with your 4-player teams. Each team captain will have either cards or tokens or whatever that represents the members on their teams. They can take a few minutes to discuss with the other teams, like the lists, and some of, if they want to give that information, what their lists are designed to do, the breakdown of those said teams. Then the captains will roll off to determine a team A and a team B. Team A will put forward an army face down, or like their card, to the defender. Team B does the same. Both reveal their defenders at the same time. Team A will place down 2 attackers to go against the first put up team, or I guess army list is a better word for that. And then Team B, sorry, I lost myself in the reading. Team B does the same. This reads weird, Ryan. Both will reveal their attackers at the same time. So basically, they will choose between the 2 armies put out first which one they want to fight, and then they'll reveal at the same time. They'll continue down that order, placing 2 teams to attack whatever the chosen defender is for each pairing until they get down to 4. Is that somewhat correct, Ryan? Did I read that wrong?
Yeah. Not gonna lie, I actually copy pasted this almost verbatim from a Warhammer World Teams event.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah,
you got it. Is basically what's gonna happen is a team's gonna put out 1 army, the other guys are gonna put out 2. The guy who put out 1 army is gonna pick one of those 2 that he gets to fight. The person that didn't pick who they're fighting gets to pick which table they're fighting on. And then you go through that process until everything's paired off, and then the remainder get paired against each other.
awesome.
I do
yeah.
tend to go cross-eyed on these things, but if this is indeed copied verbatim from a Warhammer World event, really?
Yeah.
I assume they copied it verbatim from an actual Teams event, but there are like really serious Teams events out there that you could check your.
Oh yeah, no, I cross-referenced this and some old ETC Teams events, and they were basically the exact same workflow, but I can certainly improve the clarity of it.
Very cool, because I just went cross-eyed. Someone will tell me who I'm playing on the date.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. So we've talked a lot about teams there and the matchups, Andrew. So just going back to my question before, I tried to rudely cut you off for the second time tonight, Andrew. So how does the old world, specifically as a kill points based system, and then with its rule set, impact? What do you guys think will be the impact on team construction, and then things like attacker, designer type lists, defender, type lists, starting with Ryan.
Yeah, so attacker defender is weird in this situation because really what it is the defender. I don't even like. I might change those words because the problem you run into is the defender is actually the person that picks who they're fighting, and the attacker is the person that picks where they're fighting. It's kind of a no. Actually, no, that tracks. That is a legitimate dynamic. But anyway, in terms of old world as a game, I think, like, again, fundamentally the differential system, I'm just going to go back to history here. The differential system that 40K has adopted, that everyone's been using, was developed for kill points, Warhammer Fantasy Battles to play teams events.
Fine.
So I don't really have anything to add on. We're doing the intended thing.
Sure.
Which is also a derivative of the Warhammer Fantasy Battles, like major victory, minor victory, draw system.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, sure. Over to you, Val.
How this all works? I think actually I accidentally answered this question already earlier. I think Old World works super well with it, and I have to say I like the dynamics of the team construction in making those choices hard, and the archetypes that you're going to build towards. So yeah, I think it's going to work really well.
Awesome. So on my end, I mentioned this quickly from the get-go. I thought, Ryan, you were going to stumble on my point when you talked about maybe renaming attacker and defender. I think in the construct of the old world as a specific kill points based system, where with no or limited objective play, I think your matchups tend to become a lot more like matchup dependent, right? So a list which you would traditionally label as a defender quote unquote list might not necessarily be one based on what it's up against. So people would tend to probably list your dwarves and your chaos dwarves as like points denial defender type lists, but then there's things in the meta which totally sort of counteract that. So armies that bring a lot of high strength to the table, or armies that completely skip the defensive process altogether. Like Val, you mentioned vampire counts earlier with the screams is a good example. Sort of tend to upset that traditional attacker defender type list. So I think really it's going to result, just the construct of the game and the kill point system is going to result in a lot more of a matchup based thing. But overall, like, agreed with you guys that it works very well. And then Andrew, you got anything you want to pitch in on this topic?
No, you guys have mostly covered everything, and harking back to what I think I said earlier, is I think it's going to fundamentally change the way we see how lists is constructed, just because people are going to be thinking more rock paper scissors as opposed to well, what can I take to sort of deal with whatever I'm going to face. Like, I think we're going to see some like weird different lists here, and hopefully people use this as an opportunity to think outside of the box of what maybe they're used to by going to singles events, and make more wackadoodle lists that might not work every game, but if they get the right matchups, which is what the team format is going to be trying to do, you'll see them actually like excel.
I, for one, look forward to the wackadoodle meta.
Brought to you by Ottawa. Awesome. So moving to the next question that I had, and I'll kick off with this one. That's fine. What do you guys think are some good words from the wise here in terms of designing a team for this specific event? So I think I'll just harp back on my previous comments about matchups. I think you want to approach it from that perspective. Ideally, so I think there's two big ways you can sort of skin this cat. Is say, I want to cover multiple potential lists on the enemy team. So list archetypes, right? So I've got my team of 4 players needs to have an answer to the oops all cav sort of list archetype, the magic dominance. So think something like mortuary cults type archetype, the I don't know, the points denial archetype that you could see in dwarves, or again, chaos dwarves is another good example. And you sort of either do it that way, or you skew and you lean heavily into one archetype to sort of take the choice away from your opponent by being like, we're going to skew heavily towards A or B, and then if your opponent brought multiple different types of lists, they might be left holding the bag there a little bit. So I guess that's my sort of initial takes on how I think about list construction, rather than being like, the 2 players here will be our attackers, therefore make attacker lists, which doesn't necessarily, I feel, work super well. I don't know, Ryan, what are your thoughts?
So fundamentally, what you're going to wind up with, and you're right, it is ultimately like rock paper scissors that you're playing, because what you have is you have an army you're going to offer that's going to get 2 choices back, but it gets to pick which one of those it's fighting.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have another army that is one of the ones that got offered up, so they kind of get default paired into each other.
Yeah.
So the archetypes of those 2 armies are going to be very different, because one, you're going to telegraph what you want, and your opponent's going to be able to kind of put their 2 counters to that archetype out for you to choose from.
Sure.
But then kind of the last archetype you're going to run into is the one that never gets offered, because what happens is when you go through this pairing process, there's two armies that neither side's going to offer up, and they just have to fight each other.
Yeah.
So that's where you're going to need like a pocket, like take all comers army. But if you're doing things correctly within the paradigm of how I've understood teams for the last decade, that's the army that only really needs to get a draw or maybe like an 11-9, as long
Sure.
as the rest of your team can get like 2 wins.
Sure.
That's all I have.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I agree with everything you put out there. Val, any thoughts on your end?
I think that sounded like some pretty astute advice. I think a lot of people though are just going to be playing the armies they got.
Sure.
Not everyone is. I'm sure like some of us that have like multiple things they can dig deep into. You want to be my teammate, by the way, guys. If anyone out there, if you're short on armies, you want me somewhere nearby. But yeah, I think that's gonna be a big part of it. Is like just the armies people have available. To be honest, and then trying to construct the best thing that you can from there. But the archetypes that were just described, I think, were pretty on the nose.
Awesome. Andrew, any thoughts on your end?
Not really. Like, you guys have kind of covered the points. I've kind of already touched on a few things I thought of. And now we're kind of getting into the weeds on more high level stuff that my brain doesn't really
Sure.
how I think. So it's kind of like team dynamics and stuff. Like, other than, you're gonna need like a hard hitting list, maybe a magic list, either an avoidance or a very tough army to kill list. Like, other than that type of dynamic for the team, like I really don't have tactics or any sort of insight to give.
That's fine.
But
That's
it's
fine.
great. No one does.
Yeah,
'Cause
exactly.
no one's
fair
done
enough.
this before.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, then I guess we'll just move on then. So let's talk about terrain placement and game scoring. This is going to be a bit spicier, I think. So let's start with the game scoring aspect, and specifically the decisions you've made, Ryan, in terms of objective play and secondary mission type stuff.
Okay, I'm gonna throw in one quick plug for the overall team scoring, because then it makes everything down from that make sense.
Okay, sure.
So because you have 4 players, in order for your team to win a round, with a 20-0 system, you need to score 43 aggregate points, or up to 80. That is the break point where you have scored more points than your opponent's team could possibly have scored, and you've definitively won the round. And you lose the round if you score fewer than 37 or fewer points. So
Sure.
that is important to everything else we're going to get into. So game scoring, yes, I, by pure happenstance or social engineering, wound up concluding that the SBOTO differential chart was ideal for this event. For reasons I'll get into shortly. So you must win by 100 points in order to not get a draw. So 0 to 99 is the bracket for a 10-10 draw. Everything after that is increments of 200 points. So if you win by 150, it's an 11-9. If you win by 1950 points, it's a 20-0. But so if you've seen the SBO, the SBOT differential chart, same one. The reason I really leaned into this is because all of the missions that we'll be discussing shortly, I have added not objectives that give bonus points to the people standing on them at the end of the game, just as another mechanism to try and get a decision in a game. So there's generally about up to 200 extra points available in each mission, with the my intent behind it to try and help people get, with careful play, if they're not being tabled, they might be able to turn a draw into a minor victory or a minor loss into a draw or even a minor win, depending on how things pan out. That's what those were put in there for. But much like the, kill a big monster for 50 points things, other than those very, very close games, these extra points will probably not be deciding games. They may just move you within the differential scoring brackets. And so what I've done with the quote unquote objectives is effectively they're just items of battlefield debris, the roughly the size of a poker chip, for very deliberate reasons. And they are worth, it varies by mission, but they're worth between 25 and 75 points if you control them at the end of the game. And there's an additional 25-point bonus if the unit that controls them has a banner. That was partially just because Danny and I wanted to find a way to encourage more banners to show up. I think they're cool. And there's a lot of rules that interact with them, and so when no one brings them, it just makes me sad. It's fine. And so they're laid out differently in each mission, and the overall intent is you play, and if you could choose to not go after the objectives and just go for the throat, kill your opponent, you still win. Or, maybe open up room for something like Wood Elves to just whittle you down and then, seize some objectives right near the end of the game, secure some battlefield supplies, and take the advantage over their enemy. I haven't come up with cool names for all the secondary objectives yet. I will eventually do that because I live for theme. But
Sure.
that it's just what I'm here for. It's fine. And so I have deviated from the core rulebook a little bit with this because I found the holding special terrain rules to be a little bit clunky and more designed for either occupiable buildings or something like that. So instead, to control the special mission terrain, which is just a fancy way of saying objective, you total up the unit strength of all models within a 5-inch blast template of the center of the terrain. So you can just take your blast template and just plop it on the center of the terrain at the end of the game, and you look, and for every model that's fully under the blast template, you get 1 unit strength worth, or you get their unit strength. For every model that's partially under the template, you get half their unit strength. Add it all up. If you and your opponent are both there, it's whoever has the most unit strength. If you somehow both have the exact same amount of unit strength, then too bad, neither of you get the points for it.
Sure.
You also cannot be fleeing and control an objective. And a unit can't control more than one objective.
Cool. That's a lot to think about. I have some comments for sure, but I'll pass first to Andrew.
I like the fact that you're bringing unit strength into it as opposed to say like just units, which is I think what the rulebook uses. Because I think that's a cool mechanic that isn't utilized enough.
Yeah, I agree.
So I like that you're bringing that into it. I do find the template thing a little weird as opposed to just let's measure with a tape measure like 6 inches out. But I guess the point of that is to make it a tighter circumference around the objective to get units in. It might be a little, I find it might be a little too fiddly though, because if you're just counting individual models as opposed to units closest, there might be room for arguments at the table, like, oh, that guy's in, that guy's not.
But at the same time, the alternative is you get arguments over, am I 1.2 inches or 1.3 inches away? So
Yeah, exactly.
pick what thing you want to argue about.
Question from the floor. This is something that has been solved in other games.
Yeah.
I know.
Why not just use the thing that solves it?
That also could have went. The only reason I went with the blast template is because what's something every old world player already has?
Old
A blast
40K,
template.
old 40K shit they don't use anymore.
Sure.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
I've never purchased in 20 years of playing 40K, I've never purchased an objective marker fucking mousepad circle.
Yeah, I
So I'm
don't
not
think
going to assume everyone has one. I don't want people to go buy them for this purpose.
Yeah, it's also from an immersive standpoint. I know there's a lot of people in our community that are not big fans of those, but I like the idea of the pipe lay. I think it's a clever way of doing it. The every objective based game I've played, which hasn't been the mouse pad circles are placed, has always devolved into, I think 7 of my guys are within range of this objective. Are you sure? I think it's
What
more
if-
like 5. So yeah.
What if you introduced a chance of controlling the objective mechanic?
Yeah, that could work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's slow enough. It's a limited enough amount of points that cool. Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of making
definitely like
I'm making fun of the stupid 4-up, but it
Yeah.
does make arguing for those edge cases less arduous, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'm open to figuring out that portion of it, but the
Sure.
overall intent of what the objectives are there for, I think, is what I was really hoping to get at.
Sure.
But yeah, the exact mechanism of how we determine control, I'm certainly open to fucking around with.
Yeah, like
this is first
I think
read.
I went a little too critical. Like I do like that there are objectives and there's other ways to score points or shift like the level of win or loss in the game. I think that's an awesome mechanic. Again, I really like that unit strength is being utilized as opposed to just like, oh, who's closest or whatever. I think that's awesome because again, that's an underutilized mechanic in the game that I hope they in the future, if they do introduce objectives, which I think they've kind of already laid some groundwork towards. In one of the arcane journals, I hope that's used more in the game because it's. I don't think it was there unit strength in the past. I
Yeah,
feel
it's
like there wasn't, or if there
67.
was, it was like also not. Well, I only played 8th, so I
Yeah,
guess
well, it wasn't an
for
eighth,
me,
but it was in older versions for sure.
Okay.
so it is like a cool, at least for me, new thing that when I read it, I'm like, oh, that's neat, and then like there's almost no cases where unit strength matters other than like, can I protect my character hanging outside of a unit, right? Or even that's based on models. So no, like I can't think of like anything impactful in the game. So I do like that that's introduced in the objective.
Well,
It's more just the mechanic of measuring, right?
yeah, I think the only place where it matters is for stuff like fear, terror tests, and then breaks versus fallbacks and good orders.
But even then, it's like always, at least for me, it's always been so decisive one way or the other. Like
Sure.
at that point, it didn't matter to try to break down what the unit strengths were, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Val, any thoughts on the scoring system?
I think it's cool. It's interesting. Again, I mean, as far as anything that's going to really spice up what armies look like in the meta, adding fixed objectives that are scored at the end of the game, certainly going to do it.
Yeah.
And you're definitely going to push people into different choices and archetypes. Yeah, I like that they're preset. I like that the maps all dictate where the objectives are. And I think it's a good first step. I'd love to see what happens as these missions get play tested, because I know you guys have really active local communities, and see what happens with the rubber hits the road and how you evolve it from here.
And on that note, I think Danny's going to be using some of these at the Highlander tournament in December.
Nice. Yeah, I think so on my end when I at first reading, I thought, 200 victory points isn't really going to shift my game plan much because it's like 10% of the overall score, and I'd rather just win decisively than muck around with, trying to catch an objective or two. And in doing that, detract from my overall, win path for the game. But the more I think about it and the more I listen to you guys, I may have been off on that initial read. I think in a team construct specifically, that's 800 points that are up for grabs. And when you've laid out your system of scoring, Ryan, which is, 43 aggregate points is a win and 37 and below is a loss, like that 800 points is probably more than a 5-point shift on the differential, or at least a significant part of it. So I think it will matter when you blow it up to 4 games. So I take that initial read back, and I actually kind of like it. In terms of banners, I like I'm going to call it narrative there. I now know it spites Val slightly, but I like the sort of pushing people towards list construction of bringing more banners, and then Wolves of the Sea players specifically will love that. Will love that choice. And I've already spoken about the pie plate stuff, so I think it's not a bad idea. So yeah, I guess that's my take on it. Moving on to what I think is a spicy thing in the tournament pack is terrain layouts. So in a previous version of this rule or tournament pack that I looked at, terrain layout was quite different. So instead of explaining how terrain layout works, because it's not going to be super helpful because it's all image based, I will do my best attempt to give you the sort of the overall picture here. Basically, the way this works is, and if I've understood this correctly, Ryan, feel free to jump in, is that your four tables are each going to have a set layout. And then based on how you do your matchups, you'll end up with one of 4 set layouts. But what's really extremely spicy here, I think, is that the layouts are very game impacting. So again, difficulty. There's some difficulty here in describing an image to you guys. But one of the layouts has 4. It's basically a valley with 4 hills surrounding it and some forests capping it on both sides with the difficult terrain in the middle, or dangerous terrain probably in the middle. The other one has 3 segments of impassable terrain in the middle of the map with walls between them. The third layout is basically the reverse of the valley in the first one, where it's surrounded on basically 4 sides, the center of the map, by forests with a bunch of hills. And then the final layout, I think number 4, is a bit more of your traditional 6 pieces of terrain, a little bit more haphazardly strewn around. So yeah, I think the terrain placement is going to be, or the terrain picking is going to be a huge part of matchups. There's a lot of line of sight blocking, or a lot more line of sight blocking than you would see in a typical game, also, specifically in the middle of the table. So yeah, I think this is, I think it's spicy, and it's probably going to have an impact on a lot of games. If you're a shooting army, for instance, this will impact your game. If you're the Green Knight, you may be happier with some layouts than others. So yeah, I'm all for it. I like it. Any thoughts on your end, guys? Let's go with Ryan first.
Yeah. So these were born out of I took the inventory of Andrew's terrain, and I said, okay, I need to make 4 layouts, and I have all of these resources. How do I allocate them in such a way that I can make vaguely symmetrical tables that are like symmetric to themselves, but that are all wildly different, so that 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 attacker getting to pick which table they're playing on metric actually matters.
Yeah, it's meaningful.
And so that's where we wound up with, like, someone who's very shooting oriented, probably going to like layout 1, where they're definitely going to start with 1 hill in their deployment zone, can seize another one, but at the same time, there's a hill and a forest your opponent can hide behind. Conversely, they're not going to like layout 2, where you're basically like fighting around the outskirts of a small town, farming community.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. What about you, Val?
Well, my biggest question is, Andrew, how are you going to do this?
So, what this just uses stock of like the terrain I have, and all my tables are set 2 forests, 2 hills, a line of sight blocker, which is usually a building, a wall, and a difficult terrain patch of some sort. This uses those same pieces. It's just spread out by 4 basically this would be like 2 tables of terrain per team. It's the same terrain that would be on the 4, or I guess.
Yeah, you've
It's the
just
same
spread
terrain.
it out differently. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would put like, okay, one team's gonna be playing on 4 tables, so I'd put those 4 tables worth of terrain in that, like, let's say pod, and then it's just how it's spread out in that pod. It's the same terrain, it's just set up differently. So I have the terrain to do this. It's just not how I usually set it up. I'd have to like reset up how I have every table packed. But we just probably like at the hall itself we'll just set up like pods of tables, and that's like where you'd play in like your little group. And those, I'll just put all the terrain needed for each pod in that pod and put like the tables out. So like I can do it with what I have. It's just a lot of logistics that I wouldn't have come up with myself. So I'm glad again Ryan did all that work, because I would have just been like, yeah, fuck it, you're using the tables the way I have set, because I ain't thinking this hard.
Sure.
And at the same time, like, these will be printed with the measurements and everything, just like you had at SBot sitting at the table. So, we're playing on layout 1. The player that picked playing on layout 1 has an incentive to make sure the table is set up properly, because he chose to play there.
Sure.
So that kind of helps with that issue we were having earlier in the discussion about people just shoving the terrain all over the place.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. No, I think it'll be a spicy for sure. The terrain will be super impactful. And did I skip anybody? Andrew, did you have to weigh in on this one still?
Not really. Like I don't have much to say. Like I like that the tables are vastly different, and I like that it's a different way to use the terrain that sort of I've created. And going back to like sort of theminess, they all like, at least looking at, mission 1, they all kind of have like their own little terrain defined story. Like layout 2 for mission 1, it is
I
like a
had
little
names
town.
for all of them.
Yeah, like it's a little town. Like I love that. I love like the way the armies are gonna look fighting over this like little farming community. You got the forest table, which God forbid there's a bunch of wood elf players, because they're gonna have a field day here.
Or the
Like
Green Knight? Yeah.
the Green Knight, yeah, he's gonna love this shit. Um, so I like that the tables are still like kind of symmetrical in that, every player is going to have the same things in their deployment zones and the setup, but they also now like have a little bit more of a story, whereas my terrain layouts don't. Like I tried to theme them together, but at the same time a lot of the pieces, it's just like, well, here's the pieces that go on this table, so it's more sterile. I think my layouts, this kind of has like a cool vibe to each table setup, so I really dig that, because it's gonna look cool at least on the tables, and I think it's gonna impact the games very much too as well.
Also, another piece that I forgot to mention is the layouts 1 through 4 are identical all 5 or 6 rounds of the tournament.
Yeah.
They're all designed to work with every deployment option. So yeah, the actual like terrain on the tables shouldn't move after it's set up the first time, which is just another.
Yeah, it's
thing.
actually something that Os suggested for SBOTO, and he was the guy designing the layouts. So I was like, sounds great. And I really like that. I like that it's the deployment zones that give you different flavors of the same setups.
Yeah. No, I think I think that'll work. That'll work super well. So moving on
Hours
to
involved.
yeah, hours exactly. At least it's an easy program to work with, and it's not like TTS, which has been famously described as playing Warhammer with oven mitts on. So okay, let's talk mission pack before we close this episode out. So let's I'll start by giving you guys the missions that we'll be playing at the event. So assuming that we've got a 5-rounder, I know there's still a little bit of discussion on this one. So we're going to be starting with open battle. Which is basically the out of the book one plus some objectives. Then we'll be moving to meeting engagement, which has been slightly modified, but we'll cover that after. Flank attack as the third matchup, We'll move into Mountain Pass for a fourth one, and then we'll finalize with Breakpoint. I was a little bit concerned when I saw Breakpoint, but again, it's been thankfully modified into a way that makes sense while still using the Breakpoint. So those are the matchups that the maps that we'll be playing. Sorry, the missions that we'll be playing. And then Ryan, why don't you? I hinted at a few of them, but why don't you give us some of the big changes to mission design that you've made? So you've talked about objectives, but there's also like a few special rules strewn in there, and then you've changed a few of the items from the big rule book in terms of those matchups.
Okay. I was going to run through them in order because that's how my brain works. But open battle, to kind of describe it, you basically have like a kind of flat cruciform of objectives in the no man's land area. And honestly, there's no like rules changes to open battle. It's just open battle. And in this one, the objectives are worth 50 points or 75 points if you have a banner in the unit holding it. That's open battle. Easy. Meeting engagement. It's the same one from Capital City Bloodbath, where we keep the reserves, but it's a mandatory 25% minimum, 50% maximum must be held in reserve instead of randomized. And they arrive like no other major changes there. There's an objective in the center of each table quarter for this one, and these ones are worth 25 points or 50 points if they have a banner, but the person who controls more objectives than their opponent gets an extra 100 victory points on top of that. So they're not worth a lot by themselves, but if you have 2 and the other guy has 1, there's 100 points.
Yep.
And then flank attack. The objectives are along the long center line of the table, but they're more clustered towards the flanks. Basically, like you're only ever in easy reach of 3 objectives because of the way you're forced to deploy in this mission. I don't think there were any substantial changes to the rules here other than explicitly clarifying that the flanking area you deploy in is the one on your side of the table and not next to your opponent. Because apparently that was not clear. And again, this one we're back to 50 points, 75 with a banner per objective that you hold.
Yeah.
Next is Mountain Pass. It's kind of a staggered setup with objectives. Again, I've tried to keep them predominantly in no man's land so that people are getting out of their deployment zone, hopefully. And again, no significant change to the rules of the mission. It's Mountain Pass, as we all know and love. This one, again, it's 25 victory points, 50 with a banner, and a bonus 100 if you control more objectives than the other guy. And then Breakpoint, which I shamelessly stole this idea from an event whose name I forgot, but I thought it was a kind of an elegant solution, and I went with it, so you're still calculating your breakpoint, you're playing breakpoint, and I'm just going to read this so it's clear. So all armies have a breaking point. It's equal to 25% of your total unit strength at the start of the game. To calculate breakpoint of your army, add all the unit strength, divide by 4, round fractions down. Each model is removed from play as a casualty, and with each destroyed unit, you approach your breakpoint. If during any start of turn subphase, the remaining unit strength of either army has fallen below its breakpoint, the army is considered to have broken. This is where we deviate from the core rules. Normally, the game would end.
Yeah.
Here, you continue playing for the rest of the 6 turns. However, everyone basically gains the a version of the Hierophant or Death of the General rule from Undead. So if you are not undead, after you've broken, start of turn subphase, every unit in your army takes a panic test, unless it's immune to panic for whatever reason. If the test has failed, it flees away from the nearest enemy unit, which itself is not fleeing. Armies with the Hierophant or Death of the General rule must
Crumble.
instead take leadership tests as if their Hierophant or general had been destroyed and resolve accordingly. Units that pursued off the table don't count as destroyed for the purpose of breakpoint and all those things. So you play through the end of the game as normal. The objectives are worth 25 points, 50 with a banner. However, if you break your opponent's army, you get an extra 100 victory points. Technically, both of you can accomplish this, but that's how that works out. Lastly, if we do play a sixth one, there's a mission I called Capture and Control. It's actually just a different version of open battle. It's not anything like the tower, but I basically just made the objectives worth more points than they were in the other missions. So they're worth 75, but with 100 if you have a banner. And if you control more, you get another 100 points. So there's actually 500 bonus points on the table in this one. And the special rule I put in this one is dawn attack. Basically, turn 1, your line of sight's capped at 18 inches. Turn 2, 24. Turn 3, 36. This mission's wildly experimental. It's why I made it mission 6. So if we only play 5, we just cut it out and don't worry about it. But yes, anyone's thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna jump in here. So a few things. I like the fact that you've thought of some details that probably at first glance most people wouldn't have jumped on. So interesting things that make sense narratively. So for example, on flank attack, your objectives are along the flanks, which makes sense given the overall mission construct. So I like that kind of attention to detail. I think the breakpoint solution is very interesting. Like I'm going to call it bottle tests for crumbling type situation is certainly more elegant than what the core rulebook has, where you lose some models and then the game's over, which is not a great mission for a competitive, an event setting. So yeah, I think I like it. Dawn attack, not sure about that one. I mean, it's experimental. We'll see if we get to game 6. I think it penalizes armies that don't need to be penalized right now in the meta. But yeah, those are just sort of my initial thoughts. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm just reading it over again. I think I'm going to echo Kevin's thing about Dawn Attack. Like, Ballistico shooting armies are already, for the most part, what else not included here, aren't super dominant to begin with. I guess as we see more, like, the big Death Stars of poison shooting, that might be an issue, but I guess in our meta locally, we haven't seen too much of that other than a few edge cases. I think Nick with his Tomb Kings runs that. So I don't know like how impactful that might be to begin with. And then it kind of hurts other armies that might be trying to do that shooting skew.
But the other thing it hurts is my vanguarding Pegasus Knights with 19-inch charge ranges. Just throwing that out there. Like, limiting line of sight impacts more things than just shooting. It impacts
okay,
magic.
so it's not just
it impacts.
So, okay, that's fair.
Yeah,
that makes more sense because I'm thinking is like shooting. Yeah, so yeah, you can't get turn 1 charges off. Yeah, that makes more sense to me. I guess that's cool.
Yeah. But again, wildly experimental bonus mission. That's all that is.
Yeah, it's hard for me to, I guess, talk about this without having tried it. Like all I'm doing is kind of speculating on a knee-jerk reaction to just hearing really thinking about it now. So I'd have to see it in play before I can give more definitive criticisms. As for the breakpoint one, do they really need the additional bottling test on top of already being broken? Because that feels like, I mean, if you break and half your army starts running, I think the game's over to begin with. So does that really change the outcome of the straight up breakpoint? I know we talked about this briefly at SBot, And I think my suggestion was just straight up like, well, if you break your opponent, you get X amount of bonus points, but you keep playing the game. And
Yeah,
that
that
way
would also work.
the game still plays out.
Absolutely. Again, a large part of that was the theme in me where it feels really weird to be like, our army is broken. Let's keep fighting to the death.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
yes,
not
that makes sense,
reacting
yeah.
to being broken at all.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
It
I
works.
don't know what a better solution would be. Maybe because it's a tournament though, I would tend to go a little bit more sterile and just be like, yeah, it's just bonus points. And then maybe
Yep.
if you break your opponent, it's like, okay, the person who breaks their opponent first gets like 200, and if you're able to break your opponent second, I guess, or the person who's broken then in turn breaks their opponent, they get like 100. So it like
So
closes
I'm
that
just gonna,
gap of points differential, but like you still play your game. This
I'm
just
just gonna
seems like it's gonna be a snowball of just let me finish.
Yeah.
This feels like it's gonna be like a snowball effect of like, well, I broke and now my army ran, so I'm losing big regardless. It's kind of like the same outcome to me, at least in my head without having played it. That's kind of how I read that mission. Does that make sense?
So I was looking at it two ways when I wrote it, was either not having the so-called bottle test, but giving you significantly more victory points for breaking your opponent, which is the people I stole the idea from. I want to say it was 400 or 500 victory points for breaking your opponent.
Yeah, that's too high.
And so my compromise was a smaller amount of points, but all of those, like the runaway tests, because there's a chance that it snowballs and you get extra points for the fleeing and the fleeing off the table, etc.
Sure.
Or there's a chance of nothing. So it's kind of a variable benefit. But you're right, like from like if for the sake of a competitive environment, a more static amount of points is better, I have no problem deleting that paragraph and then just making it you get 200 victory points if you break your opponent or whatever.
Yeah, I think both are viable. Like it's fine. We probably won't make it to game 6 either. So, but I like the idea. I like that you're trying to break new ground and you're looking at.
I like theme. Like I like
Yeah.
the mission to feel like we're doing a thing, and there's an amount of that shows up.
Sure.
I think you're drunk with power and you're trying to change the game.
Yes, exactly.
I just want to note that, hey, Val, we also criticize ourselves too, as you can see. So, not just you.
I know I'm teasing, man. It's I don't have a lot of notes, but I would say that I am interested in playing these missions. So that's got to be good feedback, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and I guess that was the final question before we close this out, Val, is like just expanding on that a tad, do you are you pumped about the combination of wacky terrain setup, like objective play, the special rules and secondary missions, and how that's team construct and how that's all going to reshape the game?
I'm excited for the uniqueness that creates in the event. Like,
Yeah.
team events are like just so about getting some friends together and trying to be more clever than everyone else or everyone else that's there, right? So like it's I just think it's like a really I don't know, it's going to be a very interesting tournament and it's going to be a one-off, like you won't be able to judge other events based on it. But that's a very cool thing and it'll be exciting to get stuck into it. I am super curious to see because there's been a much rumored some sort of pack that Old World may or may not receive. I've been banging this drum for a while now. And I'm hopeful that we'd see that sometime around the anniversary of the game.
Okay.
So maybe all this hard work will immediately be washed away, but
Sure.
we'll see. Because there's rumored to be like army comp restrictions. There's rumored to be, well, actually, that's all I've ever really heard is the army comp restrictions. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, like if such a thing comes out, I have no problem rewriting this from the ground up. It like, because all of the thought into the why already happened. So adapting anything they give us will actually be relatively straightforward.
Mhm.
So anyway, I'm excited either way.
Yeah. Andrew, are you pumped?
I mean, yes and no, because I see all this
Okay.
cool shit that I'm not going to get to play with because I'm going to be sitting behind a computer.
Fair.
So, yes, I am pumped. I think that's going to be a good event. I'm going to try my best to make sure we live up to the expectations of, the Canhammer brand for our events. Terrain's a big part of it. We got a solid pack now. I'll see what I can do about getting some more giveaways from various companies to give to our players. The food's gonna be good. So like I'm pumped for the event because I get a big kick out of setting up all these dominoes and then the day of watching them all like go and have the event run, have people interact with the event that I've, worked my ass off to get set up. Like that I get a big kick out of that, but it's also bittersweet because I'd also like to be in there playing. So there's that aspect of it. So yes, I'm pumped. But I'm also like, oh shit, I want to play this now and I can't. So there's that.
May I recommend having a judge and then playing as the ringer, the best of all worlds?
I'm gonna play 4
Well,
games
I
at
say,
once as a ringer.
You
Bring
need
your
3
team.
more, but as I said, Andrew, like, I'm not going to be able to play, so I'm more than happy to at least help you TO the event because I'll be too
Well,
busy with
I'm definitely
other
gonna
shit.
need help for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, like again, I won't get to interact with this.
You can't play, Ryan?
So again, I'm out of town up until like just before this. Actually, like, I'm actually still out of town the weekend this event occurs. I will be driving back from Kingston
I was
to
gonna say,
help
did you say you're
administer
gonna be
this
in?
event.
You're not in a different
Um,
country. You're in Kingston.
no, I will not have time to practice or
Oh,
paint
okay.
or
Yeah, but I mean, that is 90% of the people that are going to show up are not going to do this specific team tournament prep. They're just going to, as Val was discussing earlier, rock up with the armies they have, 3 buddies, and just go out for a good time. So, I mean, I don't think
I
you'd be sinking your team there, Ryan.
no, but I also don't want to like write this whole thing and then be like, tag Andrew, adjudicate everything. Oh, by the way, I'm playing, therefore I can't give advice because I might appear biased.
Okay,
That
that's fair.
do you guys not remember how I TO'd CCBB though, where it was just like I don't have an answer for this weird edge case, so I had to go around and ask like various tables, like, "Hey, I trust your opinion. What's your opinion on this?" And they'd be like, "Oh, I
Hey
have this," and
Shane,
then I go ask someone else. I'm like, "Okay, close enough," and then I have to go back. Like there was some weird questions I got where I'm just like, I don't fucking know. The book doesn't tell me. The FAQ doesn't tell me. Like, let me go ask these XYZ trusted players that I know are way deeper into this shit than I am. Who
I guess the way I'm viewing this is like, as cool as it would be to play, the thing I get out of seeing this come to reality is actually like you guys playing the missions and team
Sure.
composition that I came up with, and I can get more personal fulfillment out of going around and getting feedback and seeing how all of it works if I'm not playing. That's
that's fair.
Sure.
Um,
Awesome. You've already sort of touched on it, Ryan, of that how pumped you are for this because it's your baby. I guess on my end, I'm just excited to do an old world team event. I think the spaghetti sauce of different things that you've thrown into the tournament pack is going to come up. Is going to come out and play out in weird and wonderful ways, and I'm pretty excited to see that on the table. So that's going to be a load of fun. I know myself, I'm probably going to try hard to get a team going that sort of makes sense and has a good chance of doing well. And so I'm excited for those discussions. Also, I'm excited for the haggling for who gets to take a ruby ring in their army or a lore familiar, for instance, which is going to be interesting. So yeah, I think I'm just pumped for it. So unfortunately, that means for you, Andrew, that I'm probably not available as a backup judge, but that's something you're going to have to deal with.
Fine.
Okay, cool.
Is Shane for hire, Val? You know,
Shin is, I don't want to speak for him, but I would reach out to him.
might talk to him.
He was compensated, and I believe he was worth every penny.
I agree.
Fair. Yeah, that might not be a bad idea.
I highly recommend that. Highly recommended. And I am so pumped. Maybe we can make sure Rob doesn't get COVID and he can come actually play in the Steam event.
Yeah, you can have your Squarebase team and have Rob with you. That'd be great.
It's halfway there.
Half a team. Exactly.
Just both
Awesome.
play 2 games simultaneously.
They got this.
I can barely play one game simultaneously.
Yes, but on the other hand, you have multiple armies. So
There you go. Yeah, oh boy. Yeah, I'm sure that was what a disaster. That might make for some content though. For the memes.
Trying to film it also and comment it. That'd be a shit show.
Yeah, I gotta say, guys, I'm really excited that this wasn't just a fever dream and that you're actually gonna go for it. I think also by the time we're looking at actually playing this tournament, because I mean, you guys flexed on me earlier about cleaning up your hobby space immediately upon getting home from SBOTL. And now you're flexing on me by having a pack ready to go. How many months in advance? 7 months in advance? 6 months in advance? You can go fuck yourselves. That's all I got to say. But it certainly
what
looks.
I do instead of paint.
What do I do instead of everything? But it's awesome. Like Can't Hammer Team Tournament, without a doubt, the 40K version of it, just my absolute most favorite tournament experiences were at that, to the point where it's the only thing that ever makes me even contemplate playing 40K again. So now that this exists, I don't have to contemplate playing 40K again, and I sincerely thank you for that.
Fair. Awesome. Okay, so with those wise words at the end there, and that encouragement, and us getting all pumped up, let's wrap this bad boy up. So it's been a pleasure, Val, having you here with us. It's been a pleasure discussing the Toronto Open, which we all attended also. So usually I shout out the next episode, but we're still workshopping that, so I'm going to leave that blank for now. If for some reason one of our listeners out there hasn't stumbled across the Square-based podcast, make sure you do give that a listen. Frankly, I don't think that's possible. I think the Venn diagram of people who know Motley Crude and people who know Squarebase is probably like a perfect overlap at this point. But if that has happened, make sure
I might squeeze one or two more out of it though. You never know.
maybe
never
one.
know.
Exactly. That random Bangladeshi listener we picked up might be your convert.
I was thinking the horrified francophones that heard me try and say Trois Rivières. And,
probably possible. Awesome.
Right.
Ryan, anything you want to shout out before we close out?
No, I want to thank Val for coming out and for running a great event the other weekend.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to talking to everyone next time.
Awesome. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Val, for running an awesome event in Toronto. I had a great time despite my troubles getting home. And thank you for taking the time to join our podcast.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, guys. Thanks for having me. And you're welcome for the event. Let's do it again.
Let's do it again. Thanks for being here again. We loved it. And it's been slightly longer than I thought it would go, but I think we had some good discussions. I'm super happy. So, all right. So talk to you all next time. This is Motley Crude signing out, and have a good one.